Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case. The case of Marie Meur and Laura Dalton. There are individuals who can be described as true parasites. Living off others for extended periods, they are cunning manipulators who constantly exploit their victims. Even more frighteningly, some do not hesitate to take their behavior to the extreme, committing crimes with unimaginable cruelty. On the evening of March 19, 1999, residents of an apartment complex near the Iowa City campus were alarmed by a strong smell of burning and smoke coming from one of the apartments. Some residents stepped outside and saw a fierce fire raging through the windows of a small apartment. They immediately called the fire department. When firefighters arrived on the scene, the fire had already spread, shattering windows and producing thick columns of black smoke. Despite their best efforts, extinguishing the fire proved difficult. Neighbors stated that the apartment was believed to be unoccupied. As the permanent residents were out of town, firefighters initially focused on fighting the fire from the outside before entering the building. Once inside, the smoke began to clear. A desolation scene unfolded. The entire apartment had been devastated. With furniture and belongings reduced to ashes, they found a body lying near the entrance to the hallway. More shockingly, a second body was found in a back room. Both bodies were burned beyond recognition. The first body, located near the door, was less severely burned and was identified as a young woman who appeared to have died from smoke inhalation while attempting to escape. The second body, lying on a bed in a back bedroom. With most of the flesh completely destroyed, it was impossible to identify the victims at the scene due to the severe burns. For this, an examination in the laboratory of forensic experts would be required. Police were quickly called in to investigate the cause of the fire and the deaths. Initial theories suggested that the victims may have succumbed to toxic fumes or suffered an accident, possibly caused by an unextinguished cigarette, since the apartment was a common rental for students during exam periods. Investigators also considered the possibility that the fire was linked to excessive drinking. However, what they uncovered next completely shifted the direction of the investigation. Among the ashes, firefighters found a few items that were surprisingly intact. Among these items, they discovered documents that could help identify the deceased. A driver's license was found in a purse belonging to one of the victims. Following an investigation, the forensic experts confirmed the identities of the victims in there. A victim was identified as 29-year-old Laura Dalton a few days before the fire. Laura had traveled to Iowa City to visit her cousin. Strangely, Laura neither owned nor rented the burned apartment, suggesting she had ended up there by chance. None of the neighbors recognized her. Laura had grown up in the area and lived with her parents before moving away as an adult. However, she often returned to her hometown to visit family and stayed for several days. Iowa City was her favorite place, where she enjoyed spending time not only with her relatives, but also with her friends. It was a charming town where most residents lived modest lives centered around education and part-time work. The second victim, Marie Meur, was a 27-year-old woman. She came to this town on business. She lived in a rented apartment that was not the one involved in the fire. Maria, like Laura, had no known relationship or connection with the owners of the burned apartment. The next morning, Laura's cousin and Maria's mother went to the morgue to identify the bodies. However, the autopsy revealed a disturbing detail. Both victims had died before the fire started. Their lungs showed no signs of smoke or hot air inhalation, indicating they were not breathing when the fire consumed the apartment. Although the body was severely damaged, the forensic team quickly determined the cause of death to be blunt force trauma to the head, most likely from a construction tool. While inspecting the burned apartment, forensic experts discovered what appeared to be bloodstains and strands of hair. The police promptly began analyzing these as potential evidence. This evidence later confirmed Their suspicions were right. A barbell was found in the apartment and identified as the murder weapon, as it contained traces of blood from both victims during the apartment search. Investigators also found an empty can, despite severe fire damage. Appeared to be a can typically used for storing and transporting fuel. Meanwhile, the owners of the apartment denied ever storing fuel in their home, so they determined it had been used shortly before the fire. Detectives concluded that the attacker had murdered Maria and Laura, poured gasoline from the can on their bodies and nearby furniture, and set the apartment on fire to destroy evidence. The presence of flammable substances made it clear that this was a deliberate and carefully planned double murder. However, proven facts, not assumptions, were needed to solve the case. Forensic experts thoroughly examined the scene. A cigarette butt was discovered near the bodies simultaneously. Forensic experts were in for a great surprise, as it turned out that traces of incipient decomposition were found on the bodies. This decomposition will take at least a day after death. No evidence suggested that the bodies had been moved to the apartment after the murders. Most likely, Maria and Laura were killed there, and their bodies were burned several days later. Through investigation, the investigators speculate that Laura was killed on the night between Wednesday and Thursday, and her body remained in the apartment. Maria was killed a day later. On the night between Thursday and Friday, this discovery shocked the police, as they had initially believed the arson was carried out immediately after the murders to destroy evidence. The most puzzling aspect was that Maria had been brought to the apartment where Laura's body had already been decomposing for a day. Laura's friends reported that the last time they saw her alive was on Wednesday evening. That night, the group of friends decided to spend the evening at a bar, and Laura joined them for a few hours. Everyone was having fun, drinking, and relaxing. They tried not to overindulge. During the evening, Laura met a young man who had been sitting at a nearby table for most of the night. As the group became more intoxicated, Laura and the man started talking. Witnesses later admitted they didn't pay much attention to him. The two quickly struck up a conversation, and after some time, the man suggested they go to another bar. Laura initially declined, but eventually agreed. After some persuasion, witnesses stated that this was the last time anyone saw Laura alive. She left with the man shortly before midnight, according to the autopsy report. She was killed not long after. The thing to do now is to find this strange man. Unfortunately, no one knew his name and could not really describe his appearance. The police needed at least some details to begin the investigation. Witnesses were thoroughly questioned to create a rough profile of the unknown man. He was described as tall, around 20 years old or slightly older. With brown hair, witnesses also noted his disheveled appearance. Laura's friends were unaware of what had happened to her. She didn't call them the next day, and she hadn't contacted anyone at all. Laura also failed to attend the group's next party, held at the same bar the following evening. This time, Laura's friend, Maria, was present at the party. Maria's body was also later found in the burned apartment, and it appears she was killed just one day after Laura. Strangely, witnesses reported an almost identical story about Laura. Maria had been drinking with friends, and she caught the attention of a similarly unkempt young man sitting at a nearby table. He appeared friendly and spent much of the evening trying to charm her. The man seemed skilled at gaining trust, easily convincing Maria to leave with him for another party. She failed to recognize the threat and trusted the persuasive stranger. The bar owner also noticed them as they left. He provided the investigative agency with a slightly more detailed description of the man the investigator were searching for. This helped detectives create a more accurate sketch despite the limited information, but the investigation now had a lead. The police also identified his behavior pattern. He observed women in bars for extended periods, waiting until they were intoxicated enough to lower their guard before making his move. In addition, he had access to one of the rented apartments. Either using his own key or the trust of the landlords, the police interviewed everyone, including students. who might have had access to the burned apartment, however, most of them had moved out long ago and no longer had access. For a time, the investigation stalled. In addition to the help of forensic experts and laboratory tests, additional evidence is needed to advance the case. One of the key stages of the work was to conduct an analysis of the discovered empty can. The resulting picture was consistent with what is left by gasoline vapors. The empty can was clearly used to carry fuel, which was poured over the bodies. Among the other evidence found at the scene of the double murder was a matchbox with just one match missing. It appeared the perpetrator assumed the fire would destroy all evidence. However, the fire was extinguished before everything was consumed. Investigators concluded the match had been used to ignite the fire. Unfortunately, no fingerprints or DNA were found on the matchbox, leaving it unusable for identifying the suspect. After unsuccessful attempts at investigation, the investigators returned to the scene to look for more clues. By that point, the apartment had been cleaned and organized, making it impossible to find any new evidence. Initially, they had photographs taken at the scene of the fire. In one of the photos, they noticed a pair of suspicious glasses. These glasses matched descriptions provided by witnesses who had seen strangers at the bar days before the fire. Although the glasses survived the fire, they were not listed among the collected evidence. Fortunately, the apartment owner had not discarded them and handed them over to the police. When detectives examined the glasses, they discovered they also did not belong to the former tenants. The most valuable evidence ended up in the hands of the investigators, which later allowed them to obtain a huge amount of valuable information about the criminal to prove his connection with the murders, that these were not ordinary glasses, but ones with special lenses that correct vision. They were checked to determine what vision deviation the criminal had. This helped the detectives narrow down their suspect and determine whether these were his glasses. After that, the police officers had enough evidence and testimony to approximately reconstruct the picture of what happened. They reviewed the chain of events that led to this tragic outcome several times. In the end, the most probable version was recognized as the following. Presumably, both girls died one day before the fire started. The cause of death for each was prolonged beating with a blunt object, likely a barbell. They received head injuries incompatible with life to get rid of traces of the crime. The attacker decided to set fire to the apartment along with the bodies. The attacker appeared to stage the scene to resemble a real-life event. He placed the second victim in the hallway, while the first victim was beaten to death in bed. Afterward, he brought a gas can of gasoline into the apartment and carefully poured it over the furniture, floor, walls, and the victims' bodies. However, his critical mistake was smoking during the process. At the crime scene, forensic experts discovered a cigarette that had been extinguished and was not destroyed by the fire. Initially, no traces of the killer were found on the cigarette. Based on the circumstances, it seems the attacker was bent over, smoking, and pouring gasoline. When the concentration of vapors increased, the cigarette ignited. The resulting flames struck the attacker in the face, causing him to drop his glasses. The glasses were found slightly melted. It being in a less damaged part of the apartment, it is likely that the cigarette ignited the gasoline, triggering a chain reaction. This forced the killer to abandon the gas can, glasses, and cigarette at the crime scene, and assuming they would be destroyed in the fire. However, these items became key evidence. After interviewing the owner of the burned apartment, it was revealed that several valuable items, including 2 expensive household appliances, were missing. The investigators suspected the attacker would try to sell the stolen items, so they focused on local pawn shops. As these are the quickest and easiest places to sell stolen goods, their efforts paid off when they identified a suspect. After speaking with the owner of the pawn shop closest to the burned apartment, the detectives obtained receipts for items matching the stolen goods. Selling property at a pawn shop requires presenting an ID and filling out paperwork, which meant the attacker couldn't avoid giving his real name. This is how the investigators came across John Lee Meur. John was a 20-year-old unemployed man who was well known in the city since he was a regular at various parties. He knew where to get a free drink, he was a good conversationalist, and was described as a quiet guy. John attended various events after moving to the city. He had been jobless for a long time and didn't have a permanent home. He relied on friends, particularly students, who let him stay in their rented apartments, allowing him to get by. It is important to note that his appearance matches the description of the suspect and also often wears glasses. When the police looked into John's background, they discovered he had previously been conditionally released early for theft and document forgery. Now, John, the main suspect, could face a real prison sentence due to repeated offenses. An investigation also began into his possible involvement in the double murder. Immediately after that, John was arrested, and during interrogation, the police noticed slight burns on his face, including a small burn on his nose. This detail reinforced the detective's suspicion of his involvement in the fire. John appeared nervous and often hesitated before answering their questions. When he realized he was a suspect in the arson and murders, he began changing his story, leading to numerous contradictions. He claimed that, on that night, he broke in and stole several household appliances, which he later pawned. However, he denied any involvement in the arson or the murders of Maria and Laura. Refused to accept those charges, John explained that he had been using the apartment with another homeless man. Because knowing the owners would be out of town for an extended period, he described the second homeless man as suspicious and potentially dangerous. But the investigation could not confirm that this person existed. It seemed likely that John had fabricated the story to shift the blame. The investigators was determined that just a few days after the discovery of the two bodies, John visited an optical store and ordered new glasses using an old prescription. The glasses found in the burnt apartment completely corresponded to the prescription for correcting John's vision. This didn't seem like a mere coincidence. John was unable to explain why his glasses were found in the burned apartment, claiming he had lost them a long time ago. Following this, forensic experts decided to analyze the cigarette butt found at the arson site, suspecting it might contain DNA evidence from the perpetrator. By this point, John had already provided the investigators with samples for analysis. The results revealed traces of saliva and skin on the cigarette butt, which were examined and matched to John's DNA. This breakthrough was achieved using advanced forensic methods introduced in the late 1990s, which had become widely used by police at the time. These things strongly linked John to the crime scene. Though not directly to the victims, John later changed his story, admitting that he had been in the apartment and had snuck in with another homeless person when the apartment renter was not home. He offered a plausible explanation for why his glasses and cigarettes were found there. The police also focused on other pieces of evidence, particularly a leather jacket belonging of Laura, which was found in the ashes. Investigators began searching for traces of DNA. Initially, the jacket was examined under ultraviolet light, but no traces were found. Then, a different method was used to search for fingerprints. The fingerprint on Laura's jacket was identified as John's, however. This alone did not confirm his involvement in the murder. Detectives also examined John's shoes and the clothes he wore on the days of the murders. On one of his shoes, they found two tiny droplets of blood, about the size of a match head. Forensic scientists analyzed the samples and determined that the blood belonged to Maria. It was clear that John had attempted to wash his clothes, but traces of blood remained. Now, the police obtained undeniable proof of his guilt. John was unable to explain how the victim's blood ended up on his shoes. This detail became clear evidence that he had been in contact with Maria around the time of her death. When confronted with the accusations and presented with the evidence, John changed his story yet again. This time, he claimed that he had invited Maria and Laura over. They had been intimate. Then he left first, however, due to the condition of the bodies. This claim couldn't be verified. Forensic experts found no indication of an intimate relationship prior to Maria and Laura deaths. His story was clearly false, and his shifting testimonies only deepened the investigators' mistrust. With all the evidence collected, the prosecutor's office pieced together the chain of events leading to the fire and the double murder. John had gained access to the apartment while the tenants were out of town. There were no signs of forced entry. This easy access to the home alarmed the tenant's owner and moved elsewhere. After meeting Maria and Laura at a nightclub, John waited until they were intoxicated and less alert. He then initiated friendly conversation, flirted, and used his charm to gain their trust. Eventually, he convinced them to go to this apartment. His intention was to pursue intimacy, but neither Laura nor Maria reciprocated his advances. This rejection infuriated him and caused him to lose control. In his anger, he attacked Maria and Laura with a barbell. The severe head injuries they sustained from the blows resulted in their deaths the following day. On Friday, John returned to the scene to destroy evidence and steal household appliances from the apartment to cover his tracks. He set a fire, but made several mistakes, leaving behind significant evidence at the crime scene. A few days later, John was tried on charges of first-degree murder and arson. The defense has stressed that John is not known for being aggressive, although he has a history of minor crimes. He has never physically harmed anyone. Besides, one key point the prosecution has highlighted is the tattoo of 2 teardrops near his eyes, a symbol commonly used in the criminal world to indicate murder. He got these tattoos before attending the trial. However, John claims that the tattoo were merely a tribute to 2 friends who died in a car accident. The prosecution presented a combination of circumstantial and direct evidence to build its case. As John has never confessed to his guilt, the overwhelming evidence convinced the jury that John was the perpetrator. As a result, John Lee Meur was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of arson. He's sentenced to 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole. After serving 10 years, John appealed, claiming that the public defenders had failed to do their job effectively. He argued that the prosecution relied heavily on circumstantial evidence, and that his defense team had failed to adequately challenge it. The appeal was considered by the court. However, after a retrial, he was found guilty, and the sentence was upheld. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Gretchen Harrington. Gretchen Harrington was born on June 13, 1967, in Pennsylvania. She was the youngest of 3 daughters, but her family didn't stay in Pennsylvania for long. Soon after her birth, they moved to the small town of Bumo, where her father, a pastor, obtained a job at the local church. Gretchen immediately loved this new town. She spends a lot of time outdoors with her sisters and her new friends. The town was incredibly safe, giving parents felt comfortable letting their children play outside until nightfall. The town of Bumo seemed to be the ideal place for kids from a religious family to grow up. As a result, Gretchen spent a lot of time at her father's church and excelled in Sunday school, consistently earning top grades. On August 15, 1975, Gretchen's mother and newborn sister were set to return home from the hospital. 8-year-old Gretchen was excited to meet her new sibling. However, her father reminded her not to miss Sunday school, considering her perfect attendance record and high grades. Although Gretchen was hesitant, but she decided to attend church, taking her Bible along. Normally, she would have walked to church with her older sisters, but on that morning, they stayed home. The church was only a short distance away, less than a mile, so she didn't feel afraid to walk alone. The Sunday school lessons were divided into 2 sessions. First, the children gathered at Trinity Church, and after about an hour and a half, some of them, including Gretchen, were to head to her father's church. However, when the kids arrived at the second church at 11:30 a.m., Gretchen's father noticed that his daughter was missing. Thinking that Gretchen might have stayed at the first church, her father called Trinity Church to check. David's wife, a Sunday school teacher and pastor's spouse, answered the call. She reported that Gretchen was not there. She immediately informed her husband, David, about the situation. He was surprised to hear this, as Gretchen had not been in attendance at his Sunday school class that morning. Growing increasingly worried, Gretchen's father asked David to contact the police while he began searching for his daughter. He drove along the route between the two churches, checked nearby streets, and reached out to the parents of Gretchen's friends, but she was nowhere to be found. Her friends were all either at church or at home, and Gretchen's best friend, who was David's daughter, hadn't seen her all day. The police quickly launched a search for Gretchen. As people learned about her disappearance, they rallied together to help find her. Since Gretchen's father is a well-respected local pastor, hundreds of volunteers joined the search, many of whom knew and admired him. The volunteers and police scoured the town and surrounding areas, including wooded regions and the riverbank. A police helicopter even assisted the search from above. Despite the extensive search continuing late into the night, but they still couldn't find Gretchen. The search for Gretchen continued to grow the following day, with even more volunteers joining To aid in the search, the police created and distributed flyers displaying Gretchen's photo and details about her disappearance to motorists and along roads. Despite these extensive efforts, the police were unable to uncover any leads or determine what had happened to Gretchen. As the days went by with no new information, Gretchen's disappearance remained a mystery, deeply impacting the town. In the past, it was common for children to have the freedom to roam the streets without adult supervision. They would often spend hours exploring the woods and swimming in the nearby river with no one watching over them, and their parents rarely worried. However, the recent disappearance of Gretchen changed everything, which sparked widespread fear and anxiety among residents. As people tried to make sense of what had happened, various theories emerged. Some speculated that Gretchen might have left home voluntarily, while others believed she may have drowned while swimming in the river. The most disturbing theory, however, was that she had been kidnapped. As a result, parents became extremely cautious, no longer letting their children out without supervision. One mother even went as far as cutting her daughter's hair short to disguise her as a boy. Overnight, the once peaceful town turned into a place of uncertainty and fear. Police have also questioned anyone who may be involved in Gretchen's disappearance. They gathered several new leads from conversations with witnesses. One witness reported seeing a girl who resembled Gretchen near the church that morning, approached by a green station wagon. However, the witness did not see what happened next. Another person shared a similar story, but described a white Cadillac approaching the girl. The police investigated these leads by identifying and checking the owners of matching vehicles in the area. Unfortunately, this did not yield any results. 4 days later, a resident of Westchester, a nearby town, contacted the police after finding children's shorts that matched the description of Gretchen's clothing. Investigators showed the shorts to Gretchen's mother, but she confirmed they did not belong to her daughter. From then on, there was still no progress in the case. The search operation was eventually suspended, and the focus shifted to the investigation. The police continued to interview witnesses and follow up on any available leads. However, but as time passed, the chances of finding Gretchen alive grew increasingly slim. On October 14th, a jogger in a national park, approximately 20 minutes from Bumo, made a noticed something strange in the bushes. Initially, he wasn't sure what it was, but upon closer inspection, he realized it was a human body. The jogger immediately reported the things to the park rangers, who then alerted the police. Upon investigation, the authorities determined that the remains belonged to a child. However, identifying the child to be extremely difficult due to the advanced state of decomposition. Investigators initially suspected it might be Gretchen, so they showed her parents pictures of the clothes found next to the remains. These clothes had been carefully folded. Gretchen's mother confirmed the clothes found belonged to her daughter, as she had made them herself. Forensic experts further the identification by matching the remains to Gretchen's dental records. The cause of death was determined to be multiple severe blows to the head, and the case was reclassified as a homicide. The body was so decomposed that investigators were unable to determine any further details about the circumstances surrounding her death, including whether she had been sexually assaulted. Additionally, DNA analysis technology was not available at the time, 1975, leaving investigators without any DNA clues to pursue. The town was shaken by the news of Gretchen's murder, leading to an influx of tips for the police. As concerns about a violent offender still on the loose grew, citizens urged authorities to swiftly bring the perpetrator to justice. As the investigation continued, authorities received numerous tips about suspicious individuals seen in the park where Gretchen's body was found. Unfortunately, these leads did not aid in the case. Investigators also thoroughly vetted nearby residents with a history of violent crimes, but this approach yielded no results. Several months after the body was discovered, the case came to a standstill with no new developments. In subsequent years, detectives would periodically reopen the case, thoroughly reviewing existing leads and tips, but to no avail. This was largely due to a lack of evidence. Even with advancements in DNA analysis, the police found no concrete leads. No foreign DNA was found on Gretchen's body or her clothes, leaving the case unsolved for decades. The investigation was periodically mentioned in the media, but public interest waned. Following the crime, parents in the town became highly cautious and protective of their children due to fearing another attack. This collective fear lingered for years, changing the lives of Brawl's children. Months later, a crucial piece of information came to light. A woman contacted the authorities to share her account and met with the lead detective to tell her story. At the time of Gretchen's murder, the woman was 10 years old and lived in Havertone, close to Gretchen's home. She was friends with Gretchen and her older sisters, as well as other kids in the neighborhood. The woman often slept over at her friends' houses. One incident, in particular, stood out and was pivotal to her coming forward. While sleeping over at a friend's house, the woman woke up in the middle of the night to find the friend's father touching her. She then saw him quickly leave the room and was too afraid to tell anyone. However, the same thing happened again the following night. The next morning, she confided in one of her friends, who surprisingly revealed that this was a common occurrence. The friend's father would often come into their room at night. The woman immediately reported this to her parents when she returned home. But instead of contacting the police, they simply forbade her from visiting the friend's house again. This disturbing incident occurred just 1 week before Gretchen's disappearance. The woman shared a crucial piece of information with the authorities: the name of the man she suspected, David Zanstra, a pastor who taught at the Sunday school. However, her account didn't end there. She also shared a disturbing incident involving one of her friends, which happened a month after Gretchen's disappearance. This friend was approached by a man who tried to kidnap, but her friend managed to avoid the situation by refusing to get into his car. The man who made the attempt was none other than David Zanstra. To support her claim, the woman provided detectives with her personal diary from that period. In the diary entry dated September 15, 1975, she recorded a conversation with her friend, who had begged her to keep a secret due to concerns that David might cause her harm. With this new information, the police reopened the case. Upon re-examining the original case materials, detectives uncovered several suspicious details that indirectly pointed to David's involvement. Notably, it was he who initially reported Gretchen's disappearance to the authorities. The pastor David gave investigators a precise description of Gretchen's clothing: dark blue zip-up shorts with front studs and pockets. He also mentioned a white top and braided hair. However, David claimed that he had not seen Gretchen that day. This raised a question: how did he know what she wore, especially since his description's claim was later confirmed to be true after Candy's body was found, as she was wearing the exact same clothes he described. Further investigation revealed that the Sunday school classes were delayed by 50 minutes due to the pastor David's late arrival. This delay would have given him enough time to abduct Gretchen, kill her, dispose of her body in the park, and return to the church to begin teaching. According to David's initial statement, he drove some children in his van to Candy's father's church after the classes, and only became aware of Candy's absence when her father said it out to him. A significant detail in the case was that David, his wife, and their 3 children relocated to another state just months after Gretchen's disappearance. Notably, David owned multiple vehicles, including a green station wagon that drew police attention. A witness had previously reported seeing a similar vehicle near the church on the day Gretchen vanished. Given these clues, detectives decided to interrogate David. At 83 years old and residing in Georgia, David agreed to speak with detectives at the local police station on July 17, 2023. When David realized the detectives suspected him of murder, he initially responded with denial, asking what evidence they had against him. However, the detectives revealed 2 key pieces of evidence: a woman's testimony about an incident at his house, and allegations of him molesting his own daughters. David's demeanor drastically changed. As he realized his dark past was exposed, he stopped denying the accusations and, after 48 years of silence, he began to speak about the murder. According to David's account, on a Sunday morning, he drove his green American motor station wagon to Gretchen's father's church. There, he saw Gretchen walking outside and offered to give her a ride. Gretchen accepted, likely because their families were friends, and she was also on her way to his Sunday school classes. However, instead of taking Gretchen to the church, David drove her to a secluded park area. He ordered her to undress, but she refused and she asked to be taken home. David then hit Gretchen repeatedly on the head, knocking her unconscious. After Gretchen lost consciousness, David removed her clothes and assaulted her. He then drove her to another park and checked for a pulse, but found none. Believing she was dead, he carried her body into the bushes and covered it with branches. David then returned to the church to teach his Sunday school class. After he confessed, the police arrested him to Gretchen's murder and had him extradited to Pennsylvania to face trial. His arrest sparked a wider and more thorough investigation. Detectives suspected that David had assaulted multiple girls, and they strongly believed there were additional victims. The fact that he had been a pastor in various cities and states for decades led as it suggested he may have committed many more crimes. Because David was a pastor, respected by everyone, he initially was not suspected. However, with the truth finally exposed, detectives collected his DNA sample and began comparing it to evidence in unsolved cases. They also investigated unsolved disappearances of girls in cities where he had been employed. Investigators quickly identified a case similar to that of Gretchen. In 1991, 4-year-old Amanda Campbell from California, she vanished from her home in a quiet neighborhood without leaving any clues. Notably, at the time of Amanda's disappearance, David was a pastor in that same neighborhood. Although there is currently no evidence linking him to the crime, police have identified similarities between the 2 cases, suggesting he could be a suspect. David Zanstra, now 83, is being held in a jail in Cobb County, Georgia. He was denied bail and denied extradition to Pennsylvania, despite he filing an extradition request. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of April Jones. April Jones was born on April 4, 2007. April is a cheerful child, but she also has her own problems. Born 7 weeks early, she had some early health issues, but with medical support, she grew into a typical young girl. However, April was diagnosed with cerebral palsy, a condition caused by a brain injury, often due to a lack of oxygen at or shortly after birth. Cerebral palsy affected her lower body. Although her condition was not very severe, it caused her pain and made basic muscle movements difficult. Despite having a mild condition, she required special care. On October 1, 2012, at around 7 o'clock in the evening, 5 years old, April was playing outside with her friend at the Bryn Aeg housing estate in West Wales. Usually, April's parents don't let her go out to play when it's dark like that, but because she had received an excellent report card the day before, they allowed her extra playtime. April was supposed to return home after playing outside with her friend for about 20 minutes, but after that she did not return home. Her parents had last seen her on a bike, so they went out to look for her. They found April's 7-year-old friend nearby, but April wasn't with her. The friend explained that April had gotten into a car. Fortunately, she could describe the man who took April. He was wearing a green jacket, had blue or green eyes, brown hair, and a beard. Despite being young, the friend provided a crucial detail: she saw April get into the car on the driver's side. In the UK, the steering wheel is on the right side, which suggests the man was driving a left-hand drive car. Despite it being nighttime, but the police responded swiftly. The first officers reached the scene, the 999 call. While search teams were being assembled, authorities interviewed people who knew April to determine if anything unusual had occurred that day or in the days before her disappearance. April's family couldn't think of anything that could help the police. April had gone to her swimming class earlier that day, and after returning home, she was allowed to play outside with her friends. It had only been a short while since April went out, but it was getting late in the autumn, so it would get dark soon, making it very difficult to find her. News of April's disappearance spread quickly throughout the neighborhood, through word of mouth and social networks. Within hours, locals left their homes to help search her. Although their intentions were good, this outpouring of support hindered the police investigation. The police were grateful for everyone's enthusiasm, but they still needed to conduct door-to-door inquiries to see if anyone had seen April or seen the person who might have taken her. The problem was that very few people were at home because most had gone out to assist with the search. The story of April's disappearance quickly drew national attention. Television crews and reporters from all over the country flocked to the small town to cover the incident. At 10:30, the police provided a status update to the public and media, voicing concern as they still hadn't found any leads related to April. They appealed to anyone with information to come forward right away. On the evening of October 1st, authorities released more details about April's disappearance. At the time she went missing, April was wearing her school polo shirt and a purple coat. Over 100 people had joined the search to support the police. The local community played a crucial role in the search, as their knowledge of the area invaluable. In addition to locals, a large number of volunteers from England traveled to Wales to assist, and several people from South Wales also joined the search. The search was difficult due to the town's surroundings, which included mountains, waterfalls, gorges, dense forests, and uneven terrain, all of which were exacerbated by the cold, rainy, and overcast autumn evening. The police divided the volunteers into multiple search teams, which then combed through a vast area of about 60 square kilometers. After 8 hours of searching the difficult Welsh terrain, by 3:30 a.m., the volunteers had thoroughly covered the area. Although the situation was desperate, there was a poignant beauty in the fact that many people were willing to give their time to help find little April. This outpouring of support must have brought some comfort to her family, who waited anxiously by the phone for news. However, the police had prohibited the family from joining the search, fear that they might encounter terrible things about their daughter. On October 2, 2012, April was still missing despite extensive nighttime searches. In response, the police in Wales issued a child rescue notice, a nationwide alert that disseminated April's description and that of her abductor to all UK police agencies. This was the first time the child rescue alarm had been sounded nationwide. 14 hours after April's disappearance, the media began pressuring the police to release every detail of their investigation. The police faced criticism for their handling of the case. But it can be argued that this was unfair. They had responded swiftly, organizing search parties and searching for April throughout the night, doing everything possible given the challenging weather. Detective Superintendent Andy John led the investigation, keeping the public and media informed with regular updates. To aid the search, he established roadblocks where officers stopped and inspected every vehicle. Posters with April's photo were also distributed, aiming to spark anyone's memory that might help locate her. People living nearby and those from farther away had been sending reports to the police. Many of these reports mentioned the same name, Mark Bridger. Several locals identified Mark as matching describe April's kidnapper. He was known as a Land Rover driver with blue eyes and short facial hair, and notably, his car had a left-hand drive. Witnesses reported seeing Mark or his car near where April went missing. They found the last known address of Mark and multiple attempts to contact him. However, both Mark and April were not present at the address. Mark has never encountered any legal problems before. However, some local residents reported that he had participated in the initial nighttime search for April. Due to the large number of volunteers, it was not possible to verify this information. The authorities shifted their focus to locating Mark. They deployed helicopters to scour the area from above while officers searched all locations on the ground. They discovered that Mark had recently moved into a cottage called Mount Pleasant. When police arrived, they found no one living there and there were no cars there. They entered the cottage and called out April's name, but there was no response. It was initially unclear whether Mark had been evading authorities. At 4:30, police announced that Mark had been captured. Before, a police aircraft spotted him walking his dog on a country road near April's family home. He appeared to have altered his appearance by shaving his head and beard. Police helicopters led patrol cars to Mark's location. When stopped by officers, he provided his name without attempting to hide his identity. The officer then inquired about April's whereabouts, to which he responded that it was an accident, claiming he had unintentionally crushed her with his car and was now unaware of her location. During the arrest, Mark became visibly emotional. The arresting officers informed him of his rights, stating, "You do not have to say anything, but anything you say may be used as evidence." Strangely enough, Mark was eager to talk, even though he didn't have to. The officers reminded him that he was free to speak or not. Mark told them he had been searching for April on foot day and night. His car, a left-hand drive Land Rover Discovery, was in the garage. He denied abducting her and said he tried to revive her but panicked. He only learned her name that morning from the news. He wished he could remember where he left her, saying she was lifeless on the seat. He apologized to April's family. Meanwhile, in April's hometown, a large-scale search operation was underway. Police, canine teams, volunteers, and mountain rescuers scoured the Welsh countryside, but couldn't find her. Volunteers numbering in the hundreds from all over the country worked relentlessly, usually only sleep for a few hours, then continue searching. The police received over 600 offers of help, with many suggesting areas to search. Thanks to local expertise, over 20 areas were thoroughly checked. At this stage, detectives had Mark Bridger in custody and were interrogating him. Mark immediately began discussing the incidents of that day. He stated that he had no knowledge of April's whereabouts and described his activities, which included attending a parent-teacher conference at his daughter's school and then parking near his girlfriend's house, also which is close to April's parents' house. Mark admitted to consuming a few drinks and seeing two girls riding their bicycles. He remembered the dark-haired girl riding behind his car, and claimed that when he looked for the other girl, she was nowhere to be seen, but then suddenly her bike appeared. Mark admitted that he had been nearby at the time of the incident and April was hit by his car while she was riding her bike. He claimed he was drunk at the time. He stated that he didn't intend to harm April, but knew he had made a mistake. He said he took her into his car to rush her to the hospital. Mark described April's condition, said her face had turned pale and her lips were purple. He acknowledged that his actions led to her death and mentioned that he knew her parents. However, after this admission, Mark's memory became unclear. Despite initially being open about his involvement, but he couldn't recall what he did with April's body after she died. Even though the police tried to interrogate Mark many times, but they were hindered when he suddenly claimed to have amnesia. He repeatedly stated that he was in his house, couldn't find April, and wouldn't have abandoned her. Initially, Mark was cooperative and honest with the police, but they began to doubt his sincerity when he claimed memory loss at the exact moment April went missing and suspected that he might be withholding information. The police decided to tread carefully, they aware that using an aggressive tone during questioning might lead Mark to refuse further cooperation. The police obtained a statement from April's 7-year-old friend, claiming that April voluntarily got into Mark's car, appeared happy, and was smiling. It is unlikely that someone would deceive a child in this way without reason or motive. However, the police also had a witness who contradicted this account. The witness reported that April entered the Land Rover through the driver's door, which is actually the left-hand side door in the UK. This contradicts Mark's story, suggesting that his testimony may be fabricated. When confronted with this new information, Mark became uncomfortable. Despite this, he maintained his original story and showed no signs of wavering under various lines of questioning. Detectives employed a novel approach by consulting Dr. Joe Sullivan, a renowned expert in criminal body language and behavior. Dr. Sullivan's involvement went beyond analyzing Mark's interviews. He also visited his home to gather information for a psychological profile. What he found was astounding. Mark's home contained an assortment of disturbing items, including knives, handcuffs, and a shotgun, some of which were concealed, while others were openly displayed. Furthermore, he worked at a slaughterhouse. According to Dr. Sullivan's assessment, Mark was a fantasist who identified himself with fictional characters like Rambo, indicating a disconnection from reality. Despite Dr. Sullivan's advice, the police took a paternalistic approach with Mark. However, he stuck to his story. The police then relied on forensic specialists to thoroughly search his house for evidence. The search team found small specks of blood in the restroom, but at that point, it was unclear whose blood it was. It was possible that the blood came from he cutting himself while shaving. The police sent the samples to the laboratory, but it would take up to 24 hours to get the results. Dr. Sullivan warned the police that Mark was unlikely to feel empathy or guilt about his actions. Although he might try to pretend otherwise, but Dr. Sullivan believed that he lacked these emotions. As a result, Dr. Sullivan advised the police that appealing to his better nature would be pointless, as he didn't have one. The police cannot expect Mark to be remorseful, sympathetic, or confess his guilt. The police took Dr. Sullivan's advice seriously and redetained Mark on suspicion of murder. This sudden turn caught Bridger off guard, and him pale. Furthermore, explicit child photos were discovered on his laptop, leading to his second arrest for possessing offensive images of children. As the investigation intensified, Mark suspected the police had more information than they were letting on. Meanwhile, April's parents were informed on Thursday, 3 days after her disappearance, that the police had shifted their focus from finding her alive to investigating a murder case. They had to break the devastating news to their children that they had lost a sister. Receiving news that their daughter was presumed dead, but her body hasn't been found yet, was a difficult pill to swallow. The police kept this information from Mark, but they also advised the volunteers who had been tirelessly searching for April to stand down and let the experts handle the situation. However, this suggestion was met with resistance from the hundreds of volunteers, many of whom were in tears as they left the site. On Friday, for days after April vanished, police search teams continued their search for clues. There was no evidence that Mark killed April, according to forensic experts. A thorough examination of his Land Rover revealed no marks, no blood, no hair, and no skin. This was despite Mark's claim that there should have been signs of April's injuries, such as scratches on the bumper or blood or hair inside the car. He tried to explain by saying he didn't see any blood on April after his car hit her. Although April was run over, she didn't appear to have any open wounds. However, Mark's story was about to be exposed as a fabrication. On Friday night at 6:15 p.m., the lab contacted the detectives. The results of the DNA comparison between April's toothbrush and the blood spatters found in Mark's restroom. They matched. Additionally, DNA evidence was found on his fleece collar and jogging bottoms. After gathering enough evidence, the police charged April. They found photos on his laptop, which they showed him during questioning. The photos depicted minors being sexualized, exploited, and manipulated. However, Mark denied any wrongdoing, claiming he didn't enjoy things, despite being shown the images and asked to describe them. The photos were disturbing and something no reasonable person would have. Mark also denied searching for explicit websites for personal gratification, even when confronted with his internet search history. After 3.5 days in custody, the police's 96-hour questioning period was almost over. They made one last attempt to get Mark to tell the truth. The decision to press charges now rested with the Crown Prosecution Service. The police questioned Mark about April's whereabouts and whether he intended to murder her. They pointed out that no blood was found on the bathroom walls at his house, yet a full DNA profile of April was discovered. Mark claimed that if he had blood on his hands and didn't dry them, he might have accidentally flicked blood onto the walls. However, this contradicted his previous statement that he hadn't experienced any issues with blood for a week prior. Despite the inconsistencies, Mark stuck to his story, stating that some blood must have been present, even though he had previously claimed there was no blood on him or April, or in the car. Mark was subjected to intense police questioning regarding the images found on his laptop. The police were struggling to find ways to get him to reveal the truth. When asked if he was using the photographs for self-gratification, he denied it. However, he did suggest that a buildup of sexual frustration might have contributed to his actions on the morning in question. Mark's composure eventually began to crack under the pressure of questioning. He became agitated, raised his voice, and started using profanity. It was clear that he took issue with being labeled a pedophile. After a lengthy and challenging process, the police were finally able to uncover Mark's true nature. They were convinced they had the right person and had already submitted the case to the Crown Prosecution Service, CPS. The CPS subsequently authorized the police to charge Mark with the abduction and murder of April Jones. When informed of the charges, Mark showed no emotion or remorse. As he arrived at court in a prison van, everyone threw objects and shouted obscenities at him. Over the next 2 weeks, forensic investigators found more and more blood traces from April at Mark's house. The fireplace also contained several broken bones, but they were so badly decomposed that it was impossible to confirm if they belonged to April. On May 30, 2013, a jury convicted 47-year-old Mark Bridger of kidnapping and murdering April Jones. Judge Mr. Justice Griffith Williams described Mark as a chronic liar and a pedophile who had long harbored fantasies about young girls. However, the judge believed that he was not specifically targeting April, but rather was pursuing a young girl in general. Unfortunately, April became the poor victim of Mark's actions. Mr. Justice Griffith Williams immediately sentenced Mark Bridger to life in prison, with the details of his sentence to remain undisclosed to the public. Mark claimed that April's death was a tragic accident resulting from his car hitting her. However, his credibility had been lost long before his trial in the eyes of both law enforcement and the judicial system. Given the overwhelming evidence against him, Mark was unable to escape justice. April was a young girl who was playing outside with her friend. Then she was targeted by an individual with a twisted mind. April's family was relieved that Mark would spend the rest of his life in prison, unable to harm any more children, despite their overwhelming grief. However, April's remains were never found after the trial. While 17 bone fragments were discovered in Mark's house, but it was impossible to point out that they belonged to April. April's passing has left an unfillable void in the hearts of her loved ones. It is hoped that her family and friends can find some way to rebuild their lives. A funeral service for April was held in her hometown on April 26, 2013. May April Jones rest in peace. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Marie Carlson. In 1974, a girl named Marie was born into an ordinary Filipino family. Concerned about her future, Marie's mother decided to send her to the United States, hoping her daughter would have a better chance at success. Marie was eventually adopted by an American military family who already had a daughter named Esther. The two girls, close in age, quickly became friends, unaware of their true relationship. Marie lived in a foster home, not knowing that her American father was her biological father. Meanwhile, Esther, the friend with whom Marie shared her games, secrets, and dreams, was actually her biological sister. Neither of them realized their blood relationship. As the two girls grew up, they decided to leave their parents' home to start a new life together in Florida. They rented a cozy apartment near a karaoke club, which quickly became their favorite SPO. Marie Carlson had an optimistic outlook on life. She loved the color pink and often used the word beautiful as a guiding principle. In Marie's beautiful world, a new meaning suddenly appeared. It was love. Marie entered a new chapter in her life when she met Jeff. They quickly fell in love, started dating, and eventually got married. Their love was symbolized by the birth of a beautiful daughter, named Paris, reflecting the love and beauty they shared. However, Jeff remained a mysterious man, with a past and family members that Marie knew nothing about. While Marie's personal life was going smoothly, she set a lofty career goal of working for the FBI. To prepare for this challenging job, she began studying criminal law. However, her path to pursuing her dream was fraught with difficulties. Every step forward in her career required great effort. In the end, despite her best efforts, Marie left the police force without accomplishing her original goal. Marie's life, which had been happy before, gradually became difficult due to a mental disorder. The root cause was severe sexual abuse she had suffered since childhood, leaving deep psychological trauma. Over time, the mental disorder became more severe, making Marie's daily life a painful ordeal. The trauma of the past had a serious impact on Marie. It not only made her lose her self-esteem but also weakened her feelings for her husband, Jeff. Their once passionate love had cooled down and was filled with disappointment. Unable to overcome the difficulties in their marriage, they decided to divorce, feeling exhausted by the pain they had gone through. The divorce, the failure of her police career, and unsuccessful attempts to find a new job took a toll on Marie. She realized that she could no longer be a good mother to her daughter. To protect Paris from the negative environment, Marie and Jeff, who cared deeply for their daughter, agreed that Jeff would have custody of her. Despite their difficult past, the divorced couple completed their divorce smoothly. Despite the lengthy legal process, both of them tried their best for their little daughter, Paris. The divorce did not cause a rift between Jeff and Marie. They remained friends, and Jeff was always there to support Marie when needed. Marie also tried to see her daughter as often as possible and never missed her birthday. Marie was searching for meaning in life. Despite the hardships she went through, she did not give up. One day, she realized that she needed faith. Marie began attending the Emerald Coast Church founded by James Flanders. From the very first words of his simple and sincere sermon, she felt welcomed and loved. Marie began her new journey in Redemption, a town in Fort Walton Beach, Florida. James and James's colleague, Tanya Flanders, were two kind people who spread warmth to everyone around them with their kindness. They built a church called the Shrine of Mercy, where people could seek help and support. One day, they helped Marie, who was having a hard time in life. For Marie, the church was not only a place of prayer but also became her real home. This place was filled with love, and people were always willing to help each other. Marie found a new family, surrounded by warm affection. She felt free like a bird that had just escaped from a cage. As the days passed, Marie gradually regained her joy in life. Her heart was filled with happiness, and a smile was always on her lips. Marie's eyes shone with new hope, reflecting not only the gentle Florida sunshine. Her health and weight improved, and her soul was filled with happiness. The church was not only a place of worship but also a caring community. Here, Marie found a second family full of love, light, and faith. On the outside, the church looked simple and humble, blending in with other urban structures. Inside, the space was cozy with simple pews. Here, time seemed to stand still, and people were united by their common faith. But, one day, Marie was pregnant. A secret she kept hidden under her loose-fitting dress. She felt ashamed and afraid, sharing it only with a few of her closest friends. In June 2021, at the age of 37, Marie gave birth to her second daughter, Grace. The news quickly spread throughout the small town. The truth about the child's father turned out to be heartbreaking. It was a man Marie had dated for a short time. He had abused her physically and mentally. When he learned that Marie was pregnant, he left without saying goodbye. After experiencing the deep trauma of abandonment, Marie found comfort and new hope in the church. There, she always received strong support. The Flanders family became loyal protectors, surrounding Marie and her young daughter Grace with care and love. They became the real family Marie had always dreamed of. She realized that she was no longer alone. After 3 months since Marie had given birth to her daughter. This should have been a time filled with joy and happiness, but Marie made a shocking decision. She posted a surprise announcement on social media. She was leaving. Not just leaving, Marie decided to cut all ties, leaving behind the city, family, and friends. Marie kept her plans a secret, not wanting anyone to doubt or interfere. She only casually mentioned her dream and expressed her feelings to her family, as if saying goodbye forever. No one knew where she was going or what she was doing. She suddenly disappeared without a trace, leaving her family extremely worried and desperate. They did not know what to do to find her. Marie's mysterious disappearance only added to their anxiety. Jeff, Marie's ex-husband, was worried when his ex-wife went missing. He decided to call the police to look for her. As each day passed, the fear of Marie's fate increased. While everyone was still talking about Marie's disappearance from Fort Walton Beach, a terrifying truth was revealed. She had left without taking her 3-month-old daughter. Marie's sister Esther immediately became suspicious. Issues. "It's not like her at all," she said, her voice shaking. She was always protective of her child. Everyone who knew Marie was shocked. She was a model mother, always tenderly caring for 7-year-old Paris. Marie's ex-husband, Jeff, was also surprised to learn that she had stopped caring to Paris. The police could not ignore the incident. When they examined Marie's recent messages, they discovered something unusual. Her writing style was very different from her previous ones. This made them suspect that Marie might have been coerced or that someone was impersonating her. An investigation was launched. Suspicions arose about the ex-boyfriend of her, due to Marie's relationship with this man seemed to be bad. Marie's disappearance remains a mystery. Even Marie's sister Esther has been unable to confirm or deny theories about the case. Police are investigating many complex aspects, including Marie's disappearance, strange text messages, and questions about ex-boyfriend of her. In INT reviews with the police, Tanya and James Flanders provided additional information. They said Marie had gone missing before, often leaving for periods of time and returning without explanation. The family also revealed that Marie suffered from bipolar disorder, which may have caused her sudden mood swings. A few weeks before her disappearance, Marie had fallen into a state of depression. She had started taking medication but had to stop because she was pregnant. Feeling unwell, Marie asked the Flanders to look after her daughter. After lunch, Marie went to rest, while Tanya and Grace went shopping. James came to look after Marie, but when he came, Marie and her car were nowhere to be found. The Flanders immediately began searching. They searched the streets and checked the parking lots of every building. James suddenly had the idea to check the airport. To his surprise, they found Marie's car there. James drove home with the spare key. The investigators immediately checked the car, but FOUND no traces or suspicious evidence. In search of new information, they decided to go to the airport where Marie had left. Their plan was to review the security camera footage in the parking lot. The airport was responsible for storing this information. If they were lucky, they might find Marie's plane ticket, which might have her fingerprints on it. Although they found Marie's ticket, it was of no help to the investigation because there were no important traces on it. Marie's search efforts at the airport did not yield the expected results. A search of her car also turned up no clues, and the parking ticket had no fingerprints. Additionally, the security cameras in the parking lot were not working on the day Marie went missing, making the situation even more difficult. The police are focusing on the mysterious man who is the ex-boyfriend of Marie. Investigators returned to the church in the hope of finding clues about the father's identity and role in this complicated case. The church is abuzz with speculation about where Marie sought solace in the past. Parishioners have revealed Marie's dealing with her grief. She was struggling with depression and considering abortion. However, the Flanders were against the decision. They asked Marie to keep the baby and promised to help her. The Flanders' eldest child was grown, but they were desperate for another child. Even though they were in their 40s, they were still eager for the chance to become parents again. Once again, a parishioner declared Grace a gift from heaven and was a reward for the Flanders' kindness in helping Marie. Then, Jeff, Marie's ex-husband, appeared. Although he was not the baby's father, he held an important clue. Jeff revealed that he had noticed Marie was pregnant. When asked about the baby's father, Marie lied and said she was a surrogate mother for the Flanders. So who really was Grace's father? As the investigation deepened, investigators interviewed Tanya's close friends, who were also members of the church, to learn more about the case. Initially, these friends promised Marie to keep the information confidential, but eventually, all the women were forced to reveal the truth. They all confirmed that James was Grace's biological father. It turned out to be a natural pregnancy, and James' wife, Tanya, had to accept the situation silently. This attracted the attention of investigators, leading to the Flanders family being called in for further questioning. Only Tanya appeared and confirmed the information, revealing that she had been in the room when the incident occurred. She described it as having happened with the consent of all parties involved. Tanya emphasized that the important thing in this situation was the relationship between people and higher goals, not the physical aspect. After Marie's disappearance, more terrifying information about the relationship between her, James, and Tanya gradually emerged. In fact, James not only had an affair but also had a parallel relationship with both women, similar to a form of polygamy. Once, they even celebrated the child's birthday together and took a photo, in which James, Tanya, and Marie posed as a happy family. This photo was intended to prove that the ceremony was only to honor Tanya, not related to Marie. However, after investigation and interviews with Tanya's friends, new information came to light that clarified the situation. Although Tanya said Marie was satisfied with her current relationship, the reality changed after Grace was born. Marie's maternal feelings rose strongly, making it impossible for her to easily give up her daughter. According to Marie's friends, she began to be jealous of Tanya. They suspected that Marie did not want to give Grace to Tanya and intended to win James back. These accusations immediately made Tanya the prime suspect. If Marie disappeared, all of Tanya's problems would be solved. She would have the chance to raise Grace alone and continue to be James' beloved wife. It has been 2 months since Marie went missing, but no more clues have been found. Investigators have used many methods, including GPS, to find her. However, in 2011, GPS technology was not yet fully developed, so they had to rely heavily on call and text data from mobile phones. The only thing they know for sure is that Marie was at the airport with James, but not Tanya. Later, Jason, a young priest, came to the police station. He had spoken on behalf of James many times, and one day he decided to speak directly to the investigators. Jason recounted a conversation he had overheard. Shortly after Marie's disappearance, James expressed his sadness and concern. He said that he would have to leave the country because of Marie's disappearance but could not reveal the details. James only mentioned that something terrible had happened during the time when Marie was severely depressed. During that period, James stayed with Marie at the clinic for a few days, while Jason temporarily replaced him. Rumors of Pastor James' illicit relationship spread among the parishioners, and Jason was shocked to learn about James' polygamy. Jason directly asked him about his relationship with Marie. James frankly admitted that he had had sex with both Marie and his wife. James said that he and Marie had argued and fought shortly before she went missing, but he insisted that Marie was still alive when she disappeared. After this conversation, James decided to resign from his pastoral duties and quickly left the city with his family, including Tanya and Grace, to move to Arizona. Recently, Marie's family contacted the Flanders family to retrieve some of her belongings. As a result, investigators seized Marie's phone, which may have contained important information. Although most of the data had been deleted, some of it was recovered. They also found a video of James advertising precious metals on the phone, which aroused the investigators' suspicions. In 2011, committing a crime was easier than it is today. Surveillance cameras were not common, and digital traces could quickly disappear. DNA detection technology was just beginning to develop, making it easier for criminals to get away with their crimes. However, thanks to the development of digital forensics, this case may be solved. 3 years after Marie's disappearance, new software was developed that could recover data from phones and computers. Thanks to this, it was possible to recover messages between Marie and James. These messages showed a completely different side of James. The couple exchanged sensitive pictures, even taken in church. In a final email to James, Marie expressed her desire to leave Fort Walton Beach and not leave her child in what she called a cursed place. The secrets that the Flanders family had kept for so long were exposed. In desperation, James and his lawyer decided to take their last chance. They proposed a deal. If James revealed the location of the victim's body, he would only be charged with manslaughter, which carries a lighter sentence. Marie's family, after years of pain and suffering, agreed to the deal. They just wanted to know the truth and find peace of mind. James shares details about his relationship with Marie and the hardships they went through. Marie suffered from depression, which caused many arguments between them. During one argument, Marie pushed James, and when he tried to calm her down, she accidentally fell to the ground and lost consciousness. This was a fateful moment in their lives. James realized the seriousness of the situation when Marie's heart stopped beating. Although he tried to save her, Marie eventually passed away. This incident left James with deep remorse and regret. After years of fruitless searching, investigators finally found Marie's body in James Flanders' yard. The body was wrapped in a blanket and buried 5 feet underground, only discovered when James showed them the exact location. The discovery shocked everyone involved in the case. James Flanders was sentenced to 15 years in prison for manslaughter, with the possibility of parole after 11 years. His wife, Tanya, was apparently unaware of her husband's crimes and was in complete shock at Marie's death. This was confirmed by a witness, who was later revealed to be the Flanders family's lawyer. Had Marie's body been discovered earlier, experts could have determined the cause of death, which could have affected the investigation. After 5 years, Marie was finally laid to rest at her funeral. It is possible that her sister Esther sang a farewell song for her. However, the fate of little Grace remains a mystery. Currently, Grace lives with her foster mother, Tanya Flanders, in Arizona. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Chris Farmer and Peta Frampton. Peta Frampton was 24, while Chris Farmer was 25. He had decided to take his girlfriend on an adventure to explore faraway places and celebrate his achievements, while contemplating his future plans. Chris aimed to become a doctor, and he was dedicated to succeeding in that field. Recently, he had earned his medical degree, while his girlfriend, Peta, had graduated from law school. The families of Peta and Chris lived in the suburbs of Manchester, UK. Chris was the middle child among 3 siblings, his youngest sister Penny, his older brother Nigel, and himself. From a young age, Chris disliked restrictions and boundaries, but he was never aggressive or cruel. Instead, he had a free-spirited approach to life. The entire family was friendly and supportive of one another. Chris and Peta had met in school at age 14, and since then, they couldn't imagine life apart. Peta was active but more reserved, which helped balance Chris's enthusiasm. However, Peta and Chris decided to wait until after graduation to get married. Chris felt it was important to establish a stable foundation before starting a family, and Peta agreed with him. The couple loved to party and often took breaks to enjoy themselves. They frequently hosted themed gatherings, inviting many friends and acquaintances. Both had been working since a young age and had achieved financial independence. They held respected jobs, earned good salaries, and were able to travel. By that time, Peta and Chris had already explored Europe, visited Morocco, and traveled to various other destinations. In December 1977, they left their hometown for an adventure. Chris's younger sister, Penny, was envious of their journey. Chris and Peta spent about 6 months in Australia and loved it. They then decided to visit the Pacific Islands, explore the west coast of the United States, and eventually travel to Belize. They craved new experiences and want to live life to the fullest. Chris was passionate about traveling and often recorded video notes during his trips. He sent these videos and letters to his family, letting share in the adventures he had with Peta. On June 13, 1978, Chris' family and Peta's family received an update from them. They shared that they had been offered a short cruise along the coast on an American yacht called Dwayne Boston. This was a wonderful opportunity to enjoy some time on the open sea. Chris had loved sailing since he was young and was always captivated by large bodies of sea. In his letter, he excitedly described Captain Boston, who had 2 children on board named Vince and Russell. The journey was expected to last about 2 weeks. Chris and Peta, a young couple, embarked on a sailing trip with Captain Boston, a seasoned sailor who called himself a pirate of the Caribbean. Chris and Peta were experienced in extreme adventures, and the trip should have been trouble-free. After a while, Peta and Chris' parents became worried because they no longer received any updates about their children. The trip seemed like an exciting opportunity, as Captain Boston's ship, though small, offered a chance to explore the sea and new destinations. Peta and Chris spent their days fishing, relaxing on beaches, and exploring different cities and forests. Peta and Chris's plan was to enjoy their time on the ship and then visit more countries on their own after Captain Boston dropped them off. However, Chris wrote in one of his letters that Captain Boston was very strict, monitoring their work closely and punishing even minor errors. Captain Boston thought this was the best method to train capable sailors and young men. Boston's approach to education differed greatly from that of Chris and Peta, who were often surprised by the strict discipline he enforced. However, they believed that for 2 weeks, serious issues wouldn't arise. Later, one of Captain Boston's children recalled that, at the start of the journey, everything felt quite normal. But as the ship became cramped and minor disagreements occurred, tensions grew to the point where the adults could barely tolerate each other. The children Vince and Russell also frequently argued over minor matters, while their father, Boston, appeared to be disengaged. Chris informed his relatives that their plans had slightly changed. They now decided to land in Livingston, Guatemala, which meant they would finish their trip earlier than expected. After that, Peta planned to fly to New Orleans, while Chris intended to travel to Trinidad. Chris expressed dissatisfaction with the small yacht trip, suggesting that they were growing weary of seeing the sea every day. Additionally, the boat's limited space prevented them from maintaining distance from other passengers, causing irritation among everyone involved in the journey. However, Peta and Chris continued their journey, sailing around various islands, which made their experience more enjoyable. One morning around 11 o'clock, they landed on an island and went to visit the local lighthouse. There was a party there, complete with a barbecue and plenty of drinks, and everyone joined in the festivities. This turned out to be their last happy memory before something tragic happened. Then, Peta also wrote and sent letters to her relatives along with Chris. In her last letter, she mentioned that life on the boat wasn't always easy. Captain Boston frequently scolded his sons and had a quick temper. At that time, there were no mobile phones or fast communication methods, so it took about 2 weeks for letters to be delivered. Unfortunately, after Peta stopped receiving letters from Chris, she also stopped writing them. Peta and Chris' parents do not understand what happened to their children. The situation was complicated by bureaucracy. During this time, Guatemala was experiencing a civil war. Although Livingston was distant from the main conflict, it is still dangerous for foreigners because of the many gangs operating here, of which drug trafficking is a big problem. Due to the families of Peta and Chris were deeply worried. In Guatemala, dense jungles made it easy to get lost or to fall victim to gang attacks. It was common for individuals to disappear entirely in such case, Kidnappings were frequent, and for a foreigner, simply getting lost in the jungle usually means we'll die. Peta's family and Chris's family searched for any leads to find their missing children. They sent numerous letters and appeals across Central America, reaching out to city officials and medical centers, but they received no useful information. It was as if their children had vanished completely. Peta's family and Chris's family were devastated when they could not find any information about their loved ones for 6 months. They then hired a private detective in Belize, who took on the case and quickly established contact with a Catholic priest in Guatemala. The priest revealed that the bodies of a young man and a young woman of European descent had been discovered the previous summer. There were suspicions that these could be the remains of Chris and Peta. Any hope that Peta and Chris were still alive seemed to have been completely dashed. In August of the 1970s, fishermen discovered 2 bodies about 200 meters from the shore. The bodies had drowned, and their hands and feet were tied to prevent them from floating. They were also attached to engine parts, and plastic bags were found over their heads. It was clear that their deaths were violent rather than accidental, as a forensic expert identified signs of severe beatings and torture. The examination revealed that the victims were still alive when they were thrown into the water. This is a huge blow to the Peta family and the Chris family. They had suspected that the bodies belonged to their missing relatives, Peta and Chris. 6 months earlier, at the time of the discovery, the identities of the victims from the massacre were still unknown. They were ultimately buried in a standard Guatemalan grave marked with white crosses. To identify the victims, their bodies needed to be exhumed and compared with dental records from the UK. Implementing this process in Guatemala is very difficult, leading the relatives of Peta and Chris to attempt sending the remains back to the UK for examination by more experienced forensic experts. However, they encountered issues such as translation problems, bureaucratic obstacles, and indifference from local authorities. Ultimately, the victims were identified as Chris Farmer and Peta Frampton using the dental records sent to Guatemala, but the process took an excessive amount of time. Sadly, the family's struggles continued as they sought answers about who could have harmed their children. Chris and Peta were happy and friendly people, and their relatives could not fathom why they had died. Sadly, the truth behind this tragedy was only uncovered 37 years later. Detectives from both the UK and the US investigated the case, but they were unable to find any leads. In the 1980s, British police officially closed the case without notifying Chris and Peta's families. Penny, the younger sister of Chris, wrote letters to he for 4 years, sending birthday and Christmas wishes, but received no response. This situation deeply affected both families, Peta and Chris, who lost their son and daughter. They consistently reached out to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, newspapers, consulates, and police, seeking justice and updates on the investigation. Sadly, Chris's father and Peta's parents never received any answers and passed away before the case was resolved. In 2015, Chris's sister, younger Penny, decided to take charge of the investigation. She developed skills in online detective work. However, she had very little information about Chris' journey, except for the ship he has gone on at the time. Eventually, Penny located Boston, the captain of a sailing ship named Justin B., on which Chris and Peta has gone traveling before the tragic incident occurred. Penny pieced together limited information from Chris' letters. According to the letters, Chris and Peta detailed their plans to travel along the Caribbean coast with an American sailor and his 2 sons, aiming to reach Honduras. Boston, a native of Sacramento, California, was the last person to see Chris and Peta alive. In their last letters, Penny sensed tension between Chris, Peta, and Boston, leading to suspicions that Boston could be the killer. However, there was no solid evidence to support these claims. While walking her dogs, Penny suddenly had a realization about what she needed to do. She had previously created an anonymous social media account to monitor her 3 sons for safety reasons. This time, it dawned on her that she could use this account to gather evidence against Boston. She also felt it was essential to find Boston's sons, Vince and Russell, as she suspected they were involved in the murder of Chris and Peta. Henny located the accounts of both brothers, Vince, 13, and Russell, 12, at the time Chris and Peta were murdered. She confronted them, mentioning that her loved ones had died on Boston's ship and demanded answers. Russell ignored her. However, after speaking with Vince, who was more open to discussing the matter, she became convinced that the brothers Vince and Russell were themselves deeply troubled by the killings of Chris and Peta. Vince explained that their father, Boston, was a cruel alcoholic who abused them. During the trip with Chris and Peta, he got drunk and killed them both, and it felt like a scene from a horror movie. Henny encouraged Vince to go to the Sacramento police station to testify. He appreciated Penny's persistence, feeling that it was finally time to tell the truth. Following her advice in October 2015, Vince viewed the confession as a long-anticipated relief. For many years, Vince experienced nightmares about this incident. His father, Boston, was a dangerous man who committed numerous brutal crimes. However, the most terrible thing, Vince lived with this secret for nearly 4 decades, torn between his fear of his father and his desire to expose the truth. He had previously informed his grandmother and the police about the murder his father committed, but they either dismissed him or ignored his claims. Now, however, his statements had convinced the police, causing them to conduct an investigation into archived documents from 37 years ago. As a result, the police in Manchester and the United States launched an investigation. By 2016, Boston was charged with double murder. Vince reported that he witnessed the murders of Chris and Peta, and his younger brother, Russell, who was 12 years old at the time of Chris and Peta's disappearance, also provided detailed accounts of what happened. Vince described how Boston brutally beat Chris, stripped him, tied him up, and attached many heavy parts of the car that were later found on the ship. When Boston pushed Chris over the side of the ship, he was still alive, but that didn't stop Boston. Afterward, he went down to the lower deck, where screams could be heard for a long time. Later, Chris was thrown overboard, tied up and naked, and drowned in deep waters, leaving no chance for survival. In his interview, Vince shared his experiences of living under the oppressive rule of his tyrannical father, Boston. While other fathers played with their children, took them on outings, and rode bicycles, Vince's father involved him in criminal activities, such as robberies. He intended to use his children to break into homes and harm people. However, Vince and Russell refused to participate, which only led to even harsher punishments from there. Vince felt relieved that, after many years of being overlooked, people finally listened to and believed him. At the time of the online investigation, he was 50 years old. Initially, he was too afraid to discuss the murder with anyone, not even his younger brother, Russell, who also witnessed it. Their father, Boston, had threatened them, saying that if they went to the police station, he would die. He justified his actions by claiming he had no choice, otherwise, Chris and Peta can report him, so he needed to eliminate them. Boston believed that informers were the worst kind of people. He worried about what would happen if Vince and Russell ever revealed what they had seen. Who would be the next victim? The threats and intimidation Vince and Russell faced deeply affected them. They had grown up under the oppressive control of an alcoholic father who instilled fear in them and kept them quiet. Despite this, Boston's eldest son, Vince, wanted to speak out and tried to do so as soon as he escaped from his father's grasp. Vince noted that as an adult, he repeatedly reported the incident to the police, but his pleas were ignored and even mocked. At first, Henny believed Boston's children were involved in the crime. However, she soon realized they were actually victims of a criminal who had been tormenting them for years. Vince and Russell found themselves in a desperate situation, and Peta's fate was sealed as soon as they got on the ship. Records show they were misled into boarding under the false belief that Captain Boston was offering cruises called Robinson Crusoe. At first, life on the ship was enjoyable. The young passengers loved sailing and treated each other kindly. The Captain Boston took them to beautiful, remote locations, and they thought this journey would be a memorable adventure on their small vessel. However, the ship and its Captain Boston were not what they appeared. He took Chris and Peta on this trip to escape from the law. He wanted to avoid facing charges for a rape he had committed in California, so he fled to Belize. To the criminal Boston, Chris and Peta looked like a great opportunity for easy money. From the beginning, he planned to dock at a remote harbor to rob them and steal their belongings. As the police investigated this frightening man further, Boston, they discovered that he was likely involved in multiple murders. He had long been the main suspect in the disappearance of his third wife, Mary Lou, who vanished after expressing her desire for a divorce and wanting to take their two sons, Vince and Russell, with her. Vince, the couple's son, recalled that his mother disappeared in 1968 when he was just 3 years old. The children deeply missed their mother and were forced to live with their abusive father. As Vince grew older, he came to understand the terrible nature of his father, who had killed a couple of travelers without remorse, and he began to suspect that Boston was also responsible for his mother's disappearance. Boston had a motive for Mary's murder. He wanted to avoid divorce, the division of assets, custody battles, and alimony payments. Vince and Russell's grandmother told them that Boston had shot Mary in the back, but it was unclear where she got this information, and Mary's body was never found. Ultimately, Boston's involvement in Mary's disappearance could not be proven due to lack of evidence. The brothers Vince and Russell often sought answers about their mother's, Mary's fate, but their father was reluctant to discuss it. During his childhood, whenever they brought up the subject, he would harshly punish them, which instilled a lasting fear in them about bringing up the topic. Boston's children, Vince and Russell, described their childhood as walking on a knife's edge. Boston was often drunk and could become aggressive, and when he used drugs, his behavior became erratic. This led to harsh punishments for the children. They were reprimanded for even minor missteps. For them, the boat trip was one of the most terrifying experiences of their lives, as they feared they might suffer the same fate as their mother, Mary. However, during the trip, Vince fondly recalled Chris, who had taken the time to teach the boys new things. Since their mother's disappearance, they had not encountered such kindness in a long time. Boston was different around new people. He was charming, cheerful, and the life of the party. However, this changed when he became uncomfortable with strangers and began punishing his children again. For a while, Peta and Chris stayed silent and did not get involved in parenting issues because Boston insisted that his sons needed strict discipline. One day, Boston got drunk and started to physically abuse his two sons, Vince and Russell. This behavior outraged Chris, who could no longer stay quiet. He confronted Boston and criticized him for his cruelty. At that moment, Boston, still intoxicated, attempted to hit Chris, but Chris managed to dodge, causing Boston to fall overboard. Although he was helped back onto the boat, he held a deep grudge against Chris from that point on. Atmosphere tension and uncertainty filled the air after the incident. Boston felt compelled to take revenge because he thought Chris had insulted him. The following day, the couple Peta and Chris requested to be dropped off on shore. However, Boston attacked Chris from behind while he was distracted. He caught Chris off guard and struck him in the head with a single blow. Boston then delivered several powerful punches to Chris's chest and bound his hands and feet. Boston went down to the lower deck, where he knocked down and tied up Peta. The next day, he tortured and abused Peta and Chris. forcing Vince and Russell to take care of they. Vince and Russell were confused and didn't know what to do. They wanted to help Chris and Peta but were scared for their own safety. Peta asked Vince and Russell for assistance, but they did nothing. Despite the situation, Chris remained brave and did not cry. Days later, Boston announced Peta and Chris would be released on the shore. They were thrilled, thinking their suffering was coming to an end. Unfortunately, this turned out to be a cruel trick. After reaching deeper waters, he placed plastic bags over Peta and Chris' heads, tied them up, and then threw them overboard. It was essential to apprehend Boston, a brutal killer. Investigators discovered that he had sailed away from the coast of Guatemala on July 19th. Only his sons, Vince and Russell, were left behind. After the incident, he returned to Sacramento and sold the yacht. During this time, he contacted authorities, claiming he had dropped off Peta and Chris near Livingston. He accused them of drug trafficking and using illegal drugs during their trip, which caused problems in Guatemala. However, the family of Peta and Chris knew that them relatives didn't use drugs. Despite this, Boston disappeared and could not be found due to bureaucratic complications, leaving the case unresolved. Sadly, the case never went to trial. Boston was eventually found in a nursing home in Eureka, California, and was arrested on December 1, 2016. While awaiting a hearing, he faced several health issues. Just weeks before Penny and her mother were set to fly to the U.S. for the hearing, Boston's health rapidly declined. In April 2017, at the age of 75, Boston died in custody. An autopsy revealed heart and liver problems. Medical staff at the prison hospital reported that after Boston learned about the upcoming hearings, he refused to take his prescribed medications, which worsened his condition. The penitentiary labeled Boston as a coward who chose to end his life rather than confront the repercussions of the massacre he planned. Chris's family had hoped for justice to be served quickly, but the Supreme Court let them down. By this time, Peta's parents had passed away and they did not get to see the case solved. Eventually, Penny wrote a book about her brother, Chris, who was an extraordinary person and made a meaningful impact, even at a young age. In 2019, she traveled to Guatemala to visit the graves marked with white crosses where Peta and Chris were buried. Penny wept for her brother and for his girlfriend, who had stood by his side until the very end. This journey was difficult but helped her to confront her fears and pain. Chris's relatives continue to remember him, as he had aspirations of becoming a doctor and brought great pride to his family. His mother lived to be 99 years old and often felt it was unjust that her son was taken from her at the young age of 25. She often expressed that she would gladly trade several years of her life for him, believing he would have accomplished something extraordinary during that time. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Canon Kingi. Canon Kingi was born in New Zealand on December 16, 1974. When she was 7, her family moved to New Zealand, a small coastal town in Australia with a population of about 5,000. The area is known for its warm, pleasant climate. From a young age, Canon was a kind and gentle person who loved sports, particularly ballet and netball. Although she was naturally modest, she had a charming personality that made her popular among her peers. Canon was tall, had long blonde hair and striking eyes, which helped her stand out in school. Unfortunately, her beautiful appearance eventually led to serious consequences in her life. Friday, November 27, 1987, was an ordinary day. It was a beautiful sunny day. Typically, this time of year features perfect weather, warm sun and a cool breeze, so many locals were enjoying the beach. Canon's mother, Linda, went to the store to buy food and fabric to sew a lovely outfit for her daughter's upcoming birthday. After school, Canon got on her yellow bike. knowing she was going to the store to help her mother Linda choose fabric. Linda wanted to select something Sion would love, so she headed to the store right after classes ended. Once they chose the fabric for the dress, they were only free in the afternoon. After making their purchases, Linda planned to stop by the bakery to buy some treats for dinner. Sion was already feeling tired and wanted to head home. She asked her mother if she could go home by herself first. Her mother agreed, and Sion rode her bike along her favorite shortcut. While she had taken this route many times before, it didn't feel as safe today. In the 1980s, New York was a peaceful small town where everyone knew each other, making it one of the safest places in the area. The Kingi family's home was only a few kilometers from the local store, they easily reachable by bike in just a few minutes. Linda felt secure allowing her 12-year-old daughter, Sion, to ride there alone, as nothing bad had ever happened in their quiet town. In fact, her mother would follow her right after buying a few things. At 4:45 p.m., Sion rode her bike toward home, taking a path that went through the park, while Linda drove a different route in her car. Since Sion wasn't biking too quickly, she and her mother were only a few minutes apart. Linda anticipated arriving home just after Sion. However, when returned, Linda found no one at home. Sion was not there, and her yellow bicycle was missing. Initially, Linda wasn't worried about Sion's absence. The girl might have met a friend or stopped by to visit someone, especially with the weekend approaching after a long school week. Teenagers often hang out after classes, and Sion had many friends, so it was normal for her to drop in on someone. Sion had just picked out a beautiful fabric with her mother, Linda, and she could have wanted to share her weekend plans with a friend, as they were also planning to meet up. However, Linda soon began to feel anxious. Sion was well-behaved and never stayed out long without permission. Then, Linda decided to call several of Sion's friends to check if she was with them. To her dismay, no one had seen Sion. By 8 p.m., Sion still hadn't returned home. Although they lived in a small, quiet town with little traffic, Sion always respected the curfew and never wandered outside after dark. On Friday evenings, people often relax and take walks after work. As darkness falls, even the safest towns can become risky. Linda recognized this, so she chose to walk the route that Sion typically took on her bike. This path was the quickest way from their home on the outskirts to the shops in the city. Linda and her husband walked together, and about halfway there, they discovered Sion's yellow bicycle abandoned, but they did not see the girl. The abandoned bike raised concerns, especially since it was Sion's first bike, one she had cherished and would never willingly leave behind. Unfortunately, they couldn't find Sion nearby. Her parents called for her, but there was no answer. They decided to head to the police station. Before leaving, they checked their house to see if Sion had returned and bring a picture of her. With the photo in hand, they went to meet the police. The officers took their report about Sion's disappearance and officially declared her missing. The community was tight-knit, and the city had an extremely low crime rate, so everyone believed Sion would be found quickly. This situation seems to stem from a simple misunderstanding. Sion might have been hanging out with friends or got lost while walking in the forest. However, one officer recalled that there had been a kidnapping in the area shortly before this incident. To address the situation, the police reached out to local media, as they did not have access to social networks or the internet at the time. The following morning, a report about Sion's disappearance was broadcasted, in hopes of finding witnesses who might have seen her the night before. Several people came to the police station with information, but they all insisted they hadn't noticed anything suspicious. These witnesses had seen Linda and Sion while they were picking out fabric for a dress, but none of them saw Sion on their way home, and no one was on the path at that time. The witnesses provided varying details and tried to highlight any unusual occurrences, such as strange cars or odd behavior from local residents. However, they no saw that was watching Linda and Sion. A witness reported seeing a dirty white station wagon on the evening of the incident. When police were notified, they discovered the car contained a dark-haired man and a heavy-set woman. They seemed to be aimlessly driving around, possibly searching for someone. It's conceivable that Sion might have come into contact with them. Witnesses noticed this suspicious couple shortly before Sion went missing. The police working on the case noted there were approximately 170,000 station wagons in the area, with about 10,000 of them being white. As a result, the search area has been much wider. Investigators needed to examine all the cars in the region and pursue additional leads. Many police officers and hundreds of volunteers joined the search. Friends, family, neighbors, and members of the community came together to assist in the search for Sion. Ground and air search teams were organized, and photographs of the location where Sion went missing were taken and shared with the media. This method is often used to help potential witnesses recall details about what happened that day. No one was able to provide useful information to the police at first. However, by Sunday, several new witnesses came forward and aided the investigation. The first witness was sunbathing by a stream in the forest when she was attacked by an unknown man. He harassed her and attempted to drag her into his car, which was identified as a white Kingwood station wagon. A second witness saw the incident and assisted the girl in fending off her attacker. Afterward, this witness followed the suspicious vehicle when the driver tried to flee the scene, but he eventually lost sight of them. He managed to give a detailed description of the car and provided the police with its license plate number, 429. The detectives decided to check the phone number associated with the car with that plate number. They found that this number was registered in the area. It belonged to a woman named Valmay Beck. The detectives quickly located her address and visited her home. A man answered the door and confirmed he knew Valmay. He explained that he was not her relative, but her stepson. He also added that her husband knew was Barry, and they had been married for a year. The description of Barry's closely matched the composite sketch created from the witness's account of the attack near the stream. The suspect's name was Barry Watts. However, the police lacked sufficient evidence to arrest him or accuse him of kidnapping Sion. Despite this, both Barry and Valmay were viewed as potential suspects in the case. Unfortunately, the man didn't know Barry and Valmay's whereabouts. They frequently moved and rented different places, which seemed suspicious. 3 days after Sion disappeared, another witness came forward with information. This witness also reported seeing a white Holden Kingwood near the creek and described the driver as athletic, mentioning a plump woman who was acting suspiciously. After conducting a background check on Barry and Valmay, the police discovered that both had recently been released from prison in Perth, Western Australia, right before Sion went missing. Both Barry and Valmay had extensive criminal records. Just weeks prior, they relocated to Queensland from Perth, pausing their criminal activities after serving their parole. They arrived in a sedan but quickly switched to a white station wagon, which had been linked to several suspicious incidents. The police recognized that they were dealing with dangerous individuals with a long history of armed robberies, break-ins, and forgery related to obtaining fraudulent documents. This was just a portion of Barry and Valmay's criminal history. This news was alarming for the Sion family. If their daughter, Sion, became involved with these individuals, her chances of being found alive and safe were slim. At the time, Barry was 33 years old, and Valmay was 43. Valmay had 6 children from previous relationships. Both police and Sion's family viewed Barry and Valmay as particularly dangerous criminal wanted. The authorities urgently needed to locate them to investigate their connection to Sion's disappearance. 6 days after Sion went missing, a man named Tim visited the police station to report bad news. He reported that the night before, as he was heading to work, he noticed a terrible, foul smell that initially made him think an animal had died nearby. On his way back, he felt compelled to check the area again and was hit by a strong smell of decay. At the side of the road near the stream, he discovered the body of a teenage girl. She was wearing a school uniform and had blonde hair. The police quickly arrived at the location provided by Tim and discovered the mutilated body of a schoolgirl. It was evident that she had been sexually assaulted. The autopsy revealed that she had been strangled, and her body had 12 stab wounds, 3 near her heart and 2 cuts on her throat. Additionally, her spine was broken, and her arms were so badly damaged they were nearly severed from her body. The level of violence indicated that her death was extremely painful. The police suspected that this victim was the missing girl, Sion. She was wearing the same clothes as described by Sion's mother. In the laboratory, a forensic expert confirmed that the victim was 12 years old Canon Kingi. 5 days after this gruesome discovery, family Sion's and friends came together to say their final goodbyes at her funeral. During the ceremony, a classmate read a passage from Peter Pan, suggesting that the girl would always be remembered. Flowers were placed along the route where the young girl had been found. Following media coverage of the incident, a nurse named Nicole Close contacted the police. She reported having seen some suspicious individuals in the area, they driving a white station wagon. One evening, after finishing her shift at the hospital, Nicole was walking through the parking lot to her car when she noticed a white car entering the lot and slowly approaching her. Sensing something was off, she quickly ran to her car, jumped inside, and locked the door. The station wagon did not back away but parked next to her passenger door. A man then got out and approached her window, asking for help with directions. Although he seemed calm and friendly, but she felt uneasy and wanted to end the conversation quickly. She noticed a suspicious-looking woman in the station wagon and thought she saw ropes in the back, which heightened her anxiety. The man continued to speak politely and stepping closer. Despite Nicole explaining the directions multiple times, he kept asking the same question and moved closer to her. Just as he was only a few steps away, Nicole spotted another man walking through the parking lot. The driver noticed him too, which distracted him and gave Nicole the chance to escape. She quickly backed into her car, locked the door, and drove away. Nicole recalled that this incident occurred on November 2nd, before Sion went missing. Investigators viewed the reports about the white car as significant and pursued this lead. Detectives showed Nicole a lineup of photographs featuring unfamiliar faces, and she clearly identified Barry and Valmay. But the testimonies didn't end there. The day after Nicole spoke to the police, another eyewitness came forward with information about a different attempted kidnapping. He reported seeing a man attack a woman on the street, holding a knife to her throat and trying to drag her into a white station wagon. The victim fought back, injuring the attacker's hand with his own knife, and managed to escape. Police then discovered fingerprints belonging to Barry on the woman's car. She also identified Barry and Valmay as likely involved in kidnappings, rapes, and murders in the area. The officers recognized that they were dealing with particularly dangerous criminals who posed a threat to the entire community. They issued descriptions of the suspects, Barry and Valmay, and their white car, making the information public through the media. Although it seemed the criminals were in hiding, but arrest warrants have been sent to police departments nationwide, indicating the possibility that they will be caught soon. In a small town, a local power grid worker was installing wiring when he spotted a car that matched the description of Barry and Valmay's station wagon. He remembered it because of a media alert he had seen a few days earlier. After coming down from his work, he was convinced that this was the car the police were looking for. He quickly went to the police station to mark the location on a map where he had seen the vehicle. When the patrol officers arrived, Barry and Valmay had already fled. Although the police tried to chase them, they lost track of Barry and Valmay once again. Later, the department received a tip about a money transfer made by Barry and Valmay as they were leaving New South Wales. The station wagon was tracked to a motel parking lot, and fortunately, it was still there when the police arrived. The hotel staff allowed the officers to access Barry and Valmay's room. Understanding that they were dealing with potentially armed and dangerous criminals, the officers prepared their weapons. To their surprise, Barry and Valmay did not put up a fight and were arrested in the motel room. The police discovered wigs, hair dye, and a hair clipper, suggesting that they was attempting to change their appearance to evade capture. The suspects, Barry and Valmay, were interrogated for about 12 hours, during which they remained completely silent. Barry did not cooperate at all. He informed the police that he had conspired with his wife, Valmay, to ensure she maintained the same story and did not reveal any important information. In contrast, Valmay quickly gave in. She thought that by doing so, she could reduce her sentence. What she revealed to the authorities was chilling. On November 27th, Valmay claimed that she and Barry were driving around the city in search of a new victim. Barry had an obsession with violence against women, particularly targeting those who were much younger than him. His wife, Valmay, being 10 years older, did not fit his preferences. To fulfill his disturbing desires, Barry started to rape and murder girls who fit his idea of youth and beauty. Valmay claimed she went along with his actions because she was afraid of losing him. On the morning of Sion's disappearance, they spent several hours driving around, believing that finding a girl would be easy. However, most of the girls were with others, making it difficult to kidnap someone discreetly. Barry attempted to approach a number of girls himself, but they managed to evade him. Eventually, he realized that he was not as trustworthy as his wife, so he decided to use Valmay as bait to attract the girls. They parked near a local park and got out of the car. While walking along the trail, they noticed a girl on a yellow bicycle. Barry selected her as his target, and Valmay pretended to be in distress, asking the girl for help because she was having trouble with her dog. Sion, a kind-hearted girl, came Valmay and engaging in conversation. At that moment, Barry attacked Sion from behind, muffling her screams and dragging her into his dirty car. Inside, he restrained her with tape. Valmay sat in the back seat with Sion, while Barry drove away. They traveled 12 kilometers from where the abduction occurred and stopped in a forest. There, Barry laid out a blanket and started raping Sion for several hours, fulfilling his twisted desires. Valmay later reported that Sion showed incredible courage throughout the process of being raped by Barry, she enduring the abuse without crying. She complied with Barry's demands, hoping her obedience would somehow spare her life and that they might let her go. However, from the start, Barry never planned to let her live. His intent was to satisfy his twisted fantasies. Barry started to strangle the Sion and stabbed her with a knife, causing fatal injuries. Throughout this horrific scene, Valmay watched without intervening. She later reported that the belt used for strangling Sion, along with the knife and other items, were discarded nearby in a stream. The police went to the specified location, and Valmay provided them with details about the crime scene. They were able to recover evidence, including light-colored hair that seemed to belong to Sion. Valmay's confession took up 28 pages, describing the terrible ordeal the young victim Sion endured before her death. Although Barry remained unyielding during the interrogation, he became enraged upon learning of his wife's confession, Valmay. To ensure Barry was convicted, investigators attempted to extract a confession from him. However, they were unable to do so. As a result, they decided to use a complex strategy. They planned to place an undercover agent in the temporary detention cell where Barry was held. This spy will spend time with Barry as a fellow prisoner, aiming to establish a friendly relationship with him, which will hopefully lead to receiving a confession from him. A special spy was chosen for this dangerous mission because he was able to withstand the psychological pressure that the mission would cause. He was supposed to listen to Barry confess about the brutal treatment of Sion. But ultimately, this mission did not result in a confession. Meanwhile, Barry remained agitated and was desperately trying to escape punishment. During one meeting with his wife, Valmay, he subtly suggested that she should end her life before the trial to avoid testifying against him. He implied that if she chose not to, she would face serious consequences according to state law. Barry communicated with his wife very cautiously, carefully choosing his words to prevent the authorities from using their phone conversations against him. Fortunately, Valmay did not listen to Barry, which ultimately saved her life. When Barry and Valmay arrived at court, around 200 people were present, ready to confront the brutal murderers. During the trial, Valmay testified against her husband, Barry, portraying him as a true monster. She tried to defend herself by claiming she was coerced into the horrific acts. However, there was strong evidence suggesting she participated willingly. On October 20, 1988, the jury began deliberating on the verdict. After 3 hours, the jurors found the defendants Barry and Valmay guilty. Valmay Beck received a sentence of 10 years for kidnapping and life in prison for murder. However, due to her cooperation with the prosecution, she was granted the possibility of temporary release. The jury spent 6 hours discussing Barry's sentence. Finally, Barry Watts was found guilty of murder, kidnapping, and rape, receiving a life sentence without the possibility of parole. His case was officially archived, meaning he would not be eligible for release. However, the story of Barry and Valmay didn't end in prison. Barry started bragging about his crimes and told a cellmate that he had committed a similar offense. He mentioned the murder of 31-year-old teacher, Helen Marie Fenney, who went missing on October 29 of that year. Investigators later discovered that Valmay was also involved in this incident. Valmay admitted to witnessing her husband murder the teacher Helen, after which they placed her body in the trunk of their car and disposed of it in a landfill near Brisbane. Barry remained silent during police questioning, refusing to provide any information about the second victim, Helen. He seemed to hope to challenge the verdict in Sion's case in the future. However, in 2007, he confessed to murdering Sion and detailing the crime. Valmay endured assaults while in her cell, suffering regular beatings, including a severe head injury from a tin can. To ensure her safety, she was transferred to a more secure correctional facility. During her time there, she converted to Christianity and started to make positive changes in her life. Valmay applied for parole 3 times but was denied each time. In 2007, she divorced her husband, Barry. She also struggled with serious health issues, such as obesity and diabetes. In 2008, her health declined significantly, leading doctors to place her in an induced coma immediately after heart surgery. The police hoped that while she was on her deathbed, she would confess to additional crimes that she and Barry was suspected of, including numerous kidnappings, rapes, and murders in the area. Sadly, she passed away at the age of 64 without regaining consciousness, taking with her all the secrets of their horrific crimes. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Brian King and Christina Benjamin. On July 29, 1993, it was a hot day in Alice County, Texas, USA. Despite the heat, a road crew was working on Cato Road to prepare the ground for asphalt. During their break, one worker leveling gravel spotted something unusual in the thick bushes across the Smith Creek River. The object, about 100 meters away, had a grayish color that made it stand out from the surrounding greenery. Curiosity prompted the worker and a colleague to climb over a barbed wire fence to investigate the mysterious object. As they got closer, about 10 meters from the object, a foul stench hit their noses. The stench became unbearable, and they covered their noses with their clothes. As they got closer, they discovered that the object was a corpse. It appeared to be a she, probably of school age. The gruesome sight showed torn flesh covered in flies, but the most shocking aspect was that the girl's head and arms were missing. The workers quickly notified their supervisor and decided to call the police. Without cell phones and far from the nearest town, they decided to leave one worker with the body while the other went to a small neighboring town to seek help. The police arrived shortly after being notified and began examining the scene for evidence and any dismembered body parts. However, a more gruesome discovery awaited them just 300 meters away. They discovered the body of a young girl and also found the body of a young man who appeared to be about 15 years old. He was lying face down on the riverbank, about 10 meters from the bridge. Unlike the girl, he was still dressed and had not been dismembered. It appeared that he had been thrown into the river, and the current had washed him to shore. Retrieving the young man's body was much more difficult than accessing the girl's remains, so the police called the city fire department for assistance. With the help of special equipment, they were able to reach his body. Meanwhile, a team of forensic experts remained at the scene to investigate and collect evidence before it got too dark. Police worked the scene until the sun went down. They focused on the area where the bodies were found, and the medical examiner analyzed the victims. The expert determined that the first body, the girl, was that of a teenage girl who had been stabbed multiple times. She had been shot twice in the back with a .22 caliber gun, and her head had been severed from her body. It was likely with a large hunting knife or possibly an axe. The body showed numerous severe wounds on the abdomen, thighs, and genitals, with some resembling intricate hieroglyphs carved into the skin. There was a long, deep cut on the stomach, similar to those made during an autopsy. The criminal expert noted signs of extreme cruelty inside the cavity, including torn intestines and severed hands. Bruises that looked like marks from handcuffs suggested the victims had been restrained for a period before the torture started. Additionally, both of the girls' breasts had been removed. Experts believe the victims' bodies had been dead for 2 days, judging by their level of decomposition. He had been shot twice in the head with a similar weapon. There were no signs of a beating or struggle on his body. Police believe the attacker may have severed the girl's arms and head to make identification more difficult. However, he may not have realized that advanced DNA identification methods were available. However, the condition of the bodies and their decomposition could make this identification quite difficult. Forensic scientists found that the girl had been sexually assaulted. The high temperatures had caused significant decomposition, making it difficult to determine the exact details of the crime. Police believe the attack was carried out in anger or extreme hatred. However, the presence of fly larvae allowed researchers to determine a more precise time of death for both teens. The victims were tortured on the night of July 26th to 27th. To support their findings, the forensic expert consulted a forensic entomologist who studies the growth of insects on decomposing bodies and the damage they cause. Ultimately, the lab staff agreed that the time of death had been accurately determined. However, some errors regarding the timeline of the investigation had to be cleared up. Since the boy's hands and head were intact, forensic experts were puzzled as to how he escaped the same fate as the girl. They questioned why his hands were not cut off, as this would have made it easier for the criminal to conceal the victim's identity. The killer likely thought that the boy's body would be lost in the current or would drown, making it difficult to find. This might explain why he didn't dismember the body, or perhaps the body fell into the water by accident. The police believed that the dismemberment was not meant to mislead the investigation but might have been motivated by something more disturbing. Many serial killers keep trophies from their crimes. It's possible that the girl's head became part of such a gruesome collection because the attack resembled that of a maniac. The police's first goal was to find the girl's clothes. During their search, they found a clump of light-colored hair caught in the barbed wire that the workers had crossed. Police believed that this hair might have come from the decapitated victim. Unfortunately, the mutilated body had no identifying marks. However, in the boy's pocket, they found a book subscription card from a town registered to Brian King. They were able to confirm the details at the library, but it was closed for the night, so they would have to wait until morning. The next morning, the police station received a report about the disappearance of 2 teenagers from a small town, the same one where the library was located. The boy's name was Brian King, and the girl's name was Christina Benjamin. After receiving the report, police visited the boy's home and showed the wallet they had found to the father who answered the door. He confirmed that it belonged to his 14-year-old son, Brian, who was missing along with his 13-year-old stepdaughter, Christina, who had blonde hair. Days before the incident, around midnight, the children's father was awakened by a suspicious car that honked its horn and drove off. During this time, Brian was sleeping in a tent outside the house, which was unusual for a teenager. The car returned just 10 to 15 minutes later. The father noticed his son talking calmly with the driver and assumed it was one of Brian's friends. He spotted a man with blonde hair in the back seat but couldn't see the driver. Feeling reassured, he went to the bathroom. When he came back, the car and his son were gone. The father thought Brian had gone out with friends and planned to discuss this odd situation with him in the morning, so he went to bed. However, Brian never returned home, and it was later discovered that Christina had also disappeared. The parents started contacting friends and acquaintances of their children, but no one had seen the teenagers. The family had a younger girl who shared a room with Christina. She reported that on the night they disappeared, Brian entered their room and woke up Christina. He mentioned that some cool guys had arrived in a car and invited them to a party. Christina agreed, and they both left home together. Eventually, their parents reported the children missing to the police. They noted that before their disappearance, Christina had injured her foot during a school class. Upon further investigation, it was found that Christina's hair was on the forensic expert's desk. She had light hair, which was compared to strands found on a fence and those collected from home combs. The results showed that the hairs did not match, indicating they could belong to a likely killer, who also appeared to have light hair. With no evidence available, forensic experts had to rely on alternative methods. They discovered fibers on Brian's shoes that matched the material used in the carpets of Japanese cars. Brian's father provided a description of the car he saw, mentioning that it was dark in color. However, his description lacked detail, as he could not recall the specific model or license plate number. Police were particularly puzzled by the brutality that Christina had suffered. If this was not a personal hate crime, it would suggest they were dealing with a very dangerous person who was likely to commit further acts of violence. They speculate that the motive behind such cruelty could have been sexual. After interviewing the friends of the murdered teenagers, the police learned that on the evening of her disappearance, Christina was supposed to meet a man named Jason. All the witnesses who spoke to the police pointed to Jason Massey as the only person capable of committing such a crime. One of his friends revealed that Jason had long ago turned to a darker lifestyle. He had dropped out of school, never held a job, frequently killed animals, and kept their heads as trophies. Jason did not hide his disturbing interests. He once made a chilling comment, expressing enjoyment in saying that if a serial killer were active in the area, it would be him. Although he liked to boast about such things, people generally did not take him seriously. Jason was described as having long, curly blonde hair and was 20 years old at the time of these events. His mother was indifferent towards him, even hiding food in his room. The family frequently moved, faced evictions due to unpaid rent, and often lived in unstable conditions. Jason had a difficult childhood, living in a car and facing a harsh environment. He was addicted to alcohol and drugs, bullied weaker children, and started harming animals. His father was also addicted to drugs and treated him badly. During Jason's school years, his father was incarcerated for a long time, but it had a serious impact on his mental health. Jason was involved in various petty crimes, including stalking. There was an incident where he killed a girl's dog because she rejected his advances, and he continued to stalk her, leaving her extremely scared. As a child, Jason loved his younger brother but grew to hate adults. As an adult, his feelings for women became entwined with violent fantasies. He also believed in ghosts and thought he could hear them speaking to him, influenced by religious stories told to him by his devout grandmother. The year the two teenagers were murdered, he was sentenced to 12 months in prison after a police officer discovered a dead cat and some suspicious cutting tools in his car. Unfortunately, he was released early and never faced the consequences of his actions. Police reported that when Jason was arrested, he was wearing handcuffs and appeared to be enjoying the situation. Jason did not resist arrest and confidently stated that he would be released soon. After searching his home, police found numerous newspaper clippings about the murders, a collection of adult videos, a box filled with handcuffs, and knives that had traces of blood. His room also contained books on satanic themes. In the Jason's car, a brown 1982 Subaru, forensic experts discovered what appeared to be blood stains, particularly concentrated in the trunk. They also found duct tape with light hair that did not belong to the Jason, a receipt for ammunition, a hunting knife, and a brown carpet with fibers matching those found at the crime scene. During questioning, the Jason denied any involvement in the crimes. He assumed he knew where the severed body parts were and even offered to lead the police to them. They searched the forest for several hours together but found nothing. After returning to the station, Jason requested a lawyer and stopped cooperating with the police. Soon after, the police received an anonymous tip suggesting that Jason was the only one who could be responsible for the teenagers' massacre. Later, a witness emerged who had spent much of the evening of July 26 with Jason. She stated that he had left home acting strangely aggressive, likely due to drug use. She noticed he had handcuffs and a gun, which made her uneasy, but she didn't report it to the police because she was afraid of him. The girl later said that Jason owned a .22 caliber pistol, the same type used to shoot the Brian and Christina, and that he had purchased ammunition shortly before killing the two children. DNA evidence from blood and hair found in his car matched the victims. Police gathered more and more circumstantial evidence linking Jason to the massacre, while he had no alibi. That evening, his friends and acquaintances found him strange, and some even felt afraid of him. A teacher from the school Jason attended said he was fixated on disturbing images, including satanic symbols. He often spoke about murders, which frightened some of his classmates. At that point, there was no solid evidence against him. To establish Jason's connection, the FBI was called in to create a criminal profile using photographs from the crime scene. During the investigation, it was discovered that Jason's mother had discovered several of Jason's notebooks the previous June. These notebooks contained disturbing content, including a list of girls Jason wanted to kill, with detailed descriptions of the violent acts he fantasized about. Christina was at the top of the list. The alarming nature of the diary prompted Jason's mother to seek help from a psychotherapy clinic after reading them. A psychiatrist assessed Jason and concluded that he posed a danger to himself and society, leading to his admission for intensive care and further observation. However, not all medical professionals agreed with the diagnosis of antisocial disorder. Most doctors, after conducting evaluations, opposed this diagnosis, resulting in Jason's release from the clinic without further treatment. Jason's writings became crucial evidence in the case, as they showed his obsession with thoughts of murder and torture directed at young girls for several years. He claimed that his desire to kill was motivated purely by sexual arousal. On March 17, 1994, Jason was charged with 2 counts of premeditated murder, yet he maintained his innocence. 3 weeks after the charges were filed, the hearings commenced. The prosecutor's office intended to pursue the death penalty for the defendant, which is permitted under Texas law. The hearing started on September 28, 1994. The prosecution alleged that in mid-July 1993, Jason confided in a friend that he had obtained ammunition, knives, and handcuffs, and that he had devised a plan to kidnap Christina from her home. He used Brian to entice both teenagers into a car, claiming they were going to a party. Once inside, he quickly disposed of the boy and shot him in the car. Christina attempted to flee, but he injured her, caught her, and proceeded to torment her. The prosecution worried that Jason could evade justice since the public defender argued that the investigation was biased. The police focused only on Jason as a suspect after hearing about a mysterious individual, neglecting to consider other possibilities. The defense lawyer pointed out to the jury that the evidence and assumptions made by the prosecution needed further investigation. Jason's sister testified during the trial, sharing details about their challenging childhood. They often attended school unwashed, beaten, and hungry. As a result, Jason struggled to focus on his studies, despite his efforts. However, her testimony backfired when the prosecution pointed out that, despite their hardships, his sister managed to lead a decent life without committing violence. This was argued as a reason why Jason's background couldn't justify his cruel actions. The prosecution's team included a forensic expert and a forensic entomologist, who provided a thorough report on Christina's autopsy and the severe injuries she endured. Their findings indicated a brutal and unrestrained act of violence, suggesting that allowing Jason to leave the courtroom would be a grave injustice. One of the witnesses for the prosecution was Chris Nowlin, the same friend who was driving the car that transported the teenagers from their home. He chose to cooperate with the prosecution by testifying against Jason in exchange for immunity from criminal charges related to his involvement. Jason convinces his friend Chris to meet his girlfriend. Jason lies that he has been dating Christina since high school. When they reach a secluded area near a bridge, where Jason reveals his dark intentions to Chris. He plans to take Christina and Brian into the woods, kill them, and attack the girl. Chris dismisses Jason's words, as he often jokes about such things and never carries them out. Jason's former classmate testified that he had been stalking Christina for an extended period. After she rejected his advances in 7th grade, he killed her dog out of revenge and used its blood to stain her parents' car. The stalker also sent her disturbing photos of decapitated women, claiming this was how she would end up. A gun store salesman confirmed that he sold ammunition to Jason, which was later matched to the ammunition used in the murders. The day after the crime, Jason went to the wash to clean the car, but forensic experts discovered important evidence there. According to Jason's mother, he had joined a religious community shortly before the massacre, and she believed he was genuinely trying to change his ways. However, diary entries presented in court painted a different picture. They revealed that he was actually planning the crime. On the day of the hearing, a tourist was exploring the woods near where the teenagers were found murdered and stumbled upon an old, rusty refrigerator. Curious, he approached and opened the refrigerator, and was horrified to discover 30 animal skulls inside. He also found 4 red and yellow skulls in plastic bags. The skulls were accompanied by diaries written in a strange, messy handwriting, titled The Book of Murders. The diaries, which began in 1989 and ended on the day of the 1993 murders of Christina and Brian, detailed his grisly experiments with animals and outlined his plans for Christina, which he then carried out exactly as described. He had previously made attempts to commit murder but had failed, which frustrated him. His violent urges were partly driven by his hatred for his mother and a desire to kill her. Additionally, his grandmother often told him stories about demons, which may have shaped his thoughts. This evidence led the prosecutor's office to conclude that Christina's murder was premeditated. Jason described himself as a killing machine in his diaries. After both the prosecution and defense delivered their closing statements, the jury began deliberating the verdict. After 3 hours, they found Jason Massey guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. The next step was to evaluate the aggravating and mitigating circumstances to determine whether the death penalty was appropriate. The prosecution presented evidence from Jason's own diary, which detailed his gruesome actions, including the murders of 4 cats, 7 dogs, and numerous calves. He had a disturbing obsession with collecting animal heads as trophies. Testimonies from a few of Jason's friends revealed that he viewed acts of cruelty as a display of power and wanted to showcase it. The diary entries also indicated that he had no intention of stopping his violent behavior. One of his last entries expressed a desire to become the most notorious serial killer in the United States, claiming that he planned to kill over the next 20 years. It took the jury just 15 minutes to decide on the death penalty for Jason Massey on October 12, 1994. After the verdict was announced, the judge stated that executing Jason was a more humane option than what he had done to his victims. When Jason was taken to death row, he claimed that he had placed Christina's hands and head in a pillowcase along with her clothes and thrown them into the river. However, police were skeptical of his account, as he often kept trophies from his crimes. Jason was shocked by the conviction. He was determined to fight the verdict, so his lawyer filed an appeal on his behalf. Many advocates, including a Canadian coalition against the death penalty, spoke out in his support. Human rights advocates argued that the death penalty was inhumane and criticized the investigation, claiming that it was poorly conducted and ignored other potential suspects who were in the car during the kidnapping of Christina and Brian. Despite their efforts, their actions were ultimately in vain. On the evening of April 3, 2001, Jason was led to the execution chamber. For his last meal, he chose chicken legs, fried pumpkin, fried eggplant, mashed potatoes, green peas, boiled cabbage, corn, spinach with cheese, caramel fudge, pecans, ice cream, and a pot of sweet tea. Before his execution, Jason spoke to the victims' families, expressing his remorse for his actions. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Solomon family. Angela grew up in a religious family in Nashville, USA. She was talented in singing and excelled academically. Then, she earned a doctorate in pharmacy and was successful in her career, which allowed her to earn a good income. She bought a house and lived a fulfilling life. In 2001, she reconnected with Aaron Solomon, a charismatic guy she had known since school. He was a sports presenter on a TV channel and made a good impression on her. The couple started dating, and just a few months later, Angela became pregnant with a son. In 2002, their first child was born, named Grant. Immediately after that, Aaron proposed to Angela, but their relationship was complicated, and she was unsure about marriage. She initially planned to raise the child on her own. However, her religious family pressured her to marry, and she eventually agreed. Aaron turned out to be a caring father and loving husband. And their relationship improved. For years after their wedding, in October 2006, they welcomed a daughter named Gracie. Grant, who was 4 years old at the time, was thrilled to have a younger sister. He stayed by her crib and helped his mother with her care. Then, he began playing baseball and became a successful player on his school team, gaining popularity among his peers. After the birth of Gracie, the parents' relationship worsened. Aaron was a controlling and possessive man who insulted his wife and children while having multiple affairs. He used his status as a presenter to start many affairs. In 2013, 7 years old, Gracie told her mother that her father was bothering her during bath time. It was discovered that Aaron had prohibited his wife from bathing their daughter, insisting on doing it himself, and even filmed his daughter without clothes. Angela forbade Aaron from bathing or touching their daughter. Although he admitted to his actions, he threatened Angela, warning that he would take their children away if Angela told anyone. As an active church member, he demanded complete obedience from his family, so Angela felt compelled to remain silent. Angela finds out that Aaron has cheated on many other girls and learned he was molesting minors. In 2014, explicit photos of minors were found on his phone, but the incident was covered up and he lost his job. However, then he found a new job as a financial consultant at a large bank. The couple began to argue more often. Angela wanted a divorce, but Aaron refused and suggested they see a family psychologist. Angela agreed, and during therapy, it was revealed that she had been dealing with victim syndrome throughout her life. Her parents had been harsh, imposing their religious beliefs on her, and she had entered an unfortunate marriage with Aaron, who was narcissistic and struggled with sexual addiction. The sessions didn't help with their family problems. Angela found another psychologist she trusted and shared all the details of her life and family issues. She started considering a plan to leave Aaron, who was controlling and wouldn't let her go. She kept notes on her phone and communicated with the psychologist via email. However, Aaron was secretly listening to her therapy sessions, checking her phone and email, and was aware of all her plans. She complained to her parents about Aaron's troubling behavior, but they didn't support her. They sided with he, believing, due to their faith, that a woman should endure her husband's behavior and keep the household intact. She felt unsupported by everyone. Aaron's behavior deteriorated, and he started to become violent towards his wife and children. The children, wanting to protect their mother, they began sleeping in the same room out of fear of their father. One day, Aaron attacked Angela in the bathroom, attempting to strangle her with a hairdryer cord. She was ready to say goodbye to life when her 11-year-old son, Grant, intervened and managed to stop his father. Terrified, she and the children chose not to tell anyone about the incident and did not report Aaron to the police. However, he called 911, falsely claiming that she had tried to end your life using the cord. She was then hospitalized for psychiatric evaluation, despite asserting that she was mentally sound. Eventually, doctors reassured her that she was indeed healthy. Angela's psychotherapist learned about her situation and shared their correspondence, explaining that Angela was a victim of domestic violence. Angela was discharged from the hospital on May 11, 2013, and was advised to obtain a restraining order against her husband. Medical records confirmed she was not depressed, had no end-your-life thoughts, no history of mental health issues. However, she was indeed a victim of domestic violence and was in a dangerous situation. After her release, Angela was determined to secure a restraining order against her husband and file for divorce. Upon returning home, she found the house empty. She attempted to contact Aaron, but he did not respond. She also tried calling her own parents and his parents, but received no answer. Her relatives dismissed her as mentally ill and ignored her. The next day, May 12, was Mother's Day. Angela hoped Aaron would bring the children to visit her, but instead, the police arrived at her house. He had falsely reported to 911 that she was attempting to end your life. The police checked on her, but they found no cause for concern and left. Time passed, and Angela received a restraining order but still did not know where the children were. She contacted the police several times, asking them to locate the children, but they refused to take her statement because the children were with their father, Darren, who had the legal right to have them. He had not kidnapped them. She soon discovered that he had filed for divorce first and had obtained a restraining order against her. He claimed she was a danger to him and the children. Divorce proceedings began, and both his parents and her parents spoke against her. As a result, he was granted full custody of the children, and the court ordered she to pay child support. The children were not present in court and were not asked with whom they wanted to stay. The judge noted that she had been in a mental hospital, which was enough to deny her custody claims. She couldn't do anything about her children. Angela continued to live with her father and fought hard to challenge the guardianship, arguing that the children were not well with Aaron. A retrial for the guardianship case was scheduled. He hired top lawyers for the case, having recently received a large inheritance from a wealthy aunt who had passed away. During the trial, Angela's relatives once again testified against her, alleging she was intent to end her life. However, this time, psychotherapists and staff from the psychiatric hospital defended her. They confidently stated that she was a victim of Aaron's abusive behavior and had never attempted to end her life. Her injuries were inflicted by her husband. Despite this, the judge ignored their testimony and awarded full custody to Aaron. Angela did not give up and repeatedly challenged the custody decision, eventually securing the right to see her children for 2 hours a week. When she finally saw them, she was shocked by their condition. Both Grant and Gracie had lost weight, and Gracie had severe bruises under her eyes. Aaron disciplined them harshly, using physical violence, enforcing a strict diet, and banning unhealthy and sweet foods. Grant once jumped out of a moving car to escape from his father and was injured. The children were told by their father that their mother, Angela, was dead when she was actually placed in a mental hospital. He also said it was unsafe there, so they needed to move. The children believed their father at the time because they saw their mother in a bad state after being strangled and felt hopeless, thinking no one could help them. Angela fought to gain full custody of the children, which required her to undergo a psychiatric examination to prove her mental health. She passed the examination successfully. In 2014, the court increased Angela's child visitation rights to 6 hours per week, but kept the children with their father. She continued her legal battle. In early 2015, Angela received devastating news. Aaron had been raping 9-year-old Gracie for several months. The frightened girl felt she couldn't tell anyone. She described feeling sleepy and falling asleep after eating. Then she wake up in her father's bed with severe pain in her crotch and bruises on her thighs. She didn't know how the bruises got there. Her father, Aaron, claimed it was a rash from her bathing suit, but she knew that wasn't true. He never took them to the doctor, fearing exposure, even when they were very sick. Gracie recounted how Aaron beat them, drove recklessly to scare them, and neglected their basic needs. Angela was horrified by this information and tried to use it to gain custody of the children from Aaron, their abusive father, awaiting a new trial. In April 2015, Aaron filed a complaint against Angela for not paying child support, leading to her arrest. She argued that Aaron was not properly caring for the children and was using the child support money for himself and his lovers, despite having inherited wealth. Angela was later released and continued to pay child support. She fought for her children for several more years, reporting Aaron to law enforcement, contacting his church, and warning the church school about the danger he posed. However, no one took her seriously, and everyone thought she was crazy. In 2018, Grant and Gracie ran away from home. Aaron immediately contacted the police, and the children were found quickly. When they returned, Aaron punished them harshly. Angela, upon discovering this, requested an emergency custody hearing due to Aaron's abusive behavior. On August 17, 2018, during Grant's baseball tournament, Aaron and Gracie came to watch the match. After the match, Aaron took Gracie with him, while Grant stayed at the sports camp. Aaron rented a hotel room with only one bed for the night. Despite 12-year-old Gracie's request for a room with 2 beds, Aaron raped her that night. The following day, on August 18th, an emergency custody hearing took place. Gracie disclosed what her father had done, but Aaron's lawyer denied the allegations, suggesting that Gracie imagined the incident and arguing that Aaron, being a loving father, couldn't have committed such an act. Later, Grant testified that his father was abusive, beat him, fed him poorly, humiliated him, and forced him to train all day. Both children expressed their desire to live with their mother, not their father. However, the judge did not believe them. He concluded that Angela and the children were lying to damage Aaron's reputation because Aaron attended the same Grace Church as the judge and a senator, where he was well regarded. This was a closed, deeply religious community. Aaron attended church every Sunday, never missing an event, and was well regarded by the community's elite. People couldn't believe that Aaron was capable of such monstrous behavior. And there is no evidence that he abused the children. The judge dismissed Angela's request for custody. During the trial, Gracie clung to her mother and was reluctant to leave with her father. However, when her father threatened to call the police, she had no choice but to go with him. The mother lost custody rights, but the children were unable to stay with their father either. Gracie and Grant sought help from school staff, a psychologist, and the church, sharing the terrible things their father had done to them. However, the principal called them in and urged them to remain silent to protect both their and their father's reputations. Despite their efforts to explain why they didn't want to return home, the principal dismissed their claims, saying he had heard it all before and didn't believe them. He contacted their father, who then removed them from school. Nobody believed the children, as everyone thought Angela had coerced them into falsely accusing their father. One day, Gracie and Grant couldn't take it anymore and ran to their mother, Angela. Then, Aaron came to look for them and asked them to return. Grant and Gracie refused, and he allowed them to live temporarily with their mother. With the help of therapy, they set boundaries, and their father began to respect them. Grant and Gracie sometimes had to live with their father, as he still had more custody rights, but most of the time they lived with their mother. During those times, they were happy, and the relationship with their father became more tense and reached its peak. On July 20, 2020, 18-year-old Grant was driving to his training, which was about an hour away from Angela's house. Upon arriving at the parking lot, a tragic accident occurred in which Grant lost his life. His father, Aaron, who was also at the training, witnessed the incident. He immediately called 911 for help for his son. Aaron later recounted the event. Aaron explained that he had exited his pickup truck to retrieve his gear from the back. While standing in the parking lot near the building, he was focused on his phone and did not notice the pickup rolling backwards. The vehicle hit him, dragging him several meters before it went down a deep ditch. Aaron, who was there with 3 others, saw everything unfold. When the police arrived, they found Grant lying on his back beneath the front of a car, but the tires were not touching him. Blood was streaming from his nose and ears. Using a jack, they managed to lift the car and pulled him out. He was still breathing, so they performed CPR and rushed him to the hospital. Unfortunately, despite their efforts, Grant, who was in serious condition, died on the way without regaining consciousness. Although he had multiple injuries, but the official cause of death was cardiac arrest. Strangely, Aaron accompanied him to the hospital and signed papers preventing an autopsy and organ donation. When Angela learned about the incident, she hurried to the hospital and requested an autopsy, but her pleas were ignored. The police classified the case as an accident and didn't pursue further investigation. Angela believed Aaron's account of the incident was false, pointing to various inconsistencies. Grant's injuries didn't match those of someone trapped under a car. He had no typical crushing injuries. The hospital recorded just 1 head injury and 3 bruises, on his jaw, left hip, and right hip. Aaron claimed Grant drove a pickup for about an hour to reach his training, yet there were no burn marks from a hot car, nor were there abrasions from being dragged on asphalt. At the scene of the tragedy, there was no blood, and Grant's shoes were completely clean, which contradicted Aaron's story. The grass near the car's exit and the path where the body was dragged were untouched. There weren't even tire tracks where they should have been. Instead, they were found on the other side of the sidewalk. Grant's glasses were discovered there too. He always wore his glasses because he had poor vision without them, shown in all his photos. So, how did his glasses end up on the sidewalk if he wasn't there? He was in the parking lot. Why didn't his glasses fall there when the car allegedly ran over him? According to Aaron, Grant had his back to the car and didn't see it coming when it moved in reverse. Strangely, Grant was found lying on his back under the car but in the opposite direction. How could his body have turned 180 degrees under the car? It seems impossible. Furthermore, how could the car back into the ditch and then get back up and out of the ditch? It was hard to believe. None of the people in the nearby buildings heard Grant's screams, which should have been heard during such an accident. Everything happened quietly, so no one saw or heard anything. There were no CCTV cameras, and the three guys Aaron mentioned on the call were not there either. Strangely, Aaron did not attempt to rescue his son from the car, even though Aaron was briefly with him. Aaron just watched as his son died. Grant never stored equipment in the back of the car. He always left his uniform on the back seat. The phone Aaron claimed Grant was using was never found. Although Grant always carried his phone with him and called his girlfriend every morning, he didn't call that day for some reason. There was no damage to the car. Even though the rear bumper of this car model is fragile and prone to breaking, it was intact. It would have been damaged in such a descent. There were no witnesses to this tragic accident. A man saw Aaron walking along the road shortly before the tragedy, in the parking lot. It's unclear what he was doing there, although Aaron claimed he arrived later. At his son's funeral, Aaron described his death as a divine act, leaving everyone surprised. People were shocked by Aaron's lack of emotion. He showed no grief for his son. Angela suspected that he may have hit their son with his car elsewhere and staged the accident by bringing their son to the location afterwards. There was confusion as to why the pickup truck unexpectedly rolled away, as it had been parked correctly and had no previous issues. It was speculated that the truck might have had a technical fault, and although Aaron initially suggested investigating it to sue the manufacturer for compensation, he eventually declined, which was out of character for him since he usually pursued financial gains. He continued to drive the truck without any concern for several months. Angela wanted to investigate the truck herself, but Aaron strongly opposed the idea and promptly sent the vehicle to the scrapyard. This was puzzling, as the truck was in excellent condition and could have been sold for a good price. Angela managed to locate the vehicle in spring 2021 and arranged for an independent examination. Experts concluded that the accident could not have occurred as Aaron had claimed. Angela then pushed for the investigation of the case, which had been closed, to be reopened. Grant had just turned 18, according to Angela, and he had always protected Gracie's from their abusive father. He warned his father that as soon as he turned 18, he would go to court. He and his sister Gracie planned to formally free themselves from their father's control, believing the court would take them more seriously as adults. In Angela's opinion, Aaron feared this and decided to stop his son. Gracie was devastated by the loss of her beloved brother, who could protect her. On May 12, 2021, Gracie, then 14, uploaded an 18-minute video on YouTube in which she described her father, Aaron, as a monster. She claimed that he attempted to kill their mother, raped her, and physically abused both her and Grant, eventually killing Grant's. Gracie fears that her father might harm her now that her brother is gone. They are defenseless, and their father started harassing them. Despite a restraining order, Aaron continued to stalk she and begged her to return home, but she refused. She was granted legal protection, but her father ignored it and kept following her from school. Due to the school principal's friendship with he from church, they refused to enforce the restraining order. After this interview, Aaron once again complained that Gracie was being negatively influenced and turned against him. He persuaded she that she imagined everything and that her mother had suggested the idea of rape. Aaron filed a defamation lawsuit against Angela, gathering people who refuted the information in the video Gracie recorded. He claimed Angela demanded he give up custody and threatened him. Angela was determined to seek justice. At the trial, Aaron withdrew the lawsuit but is considering refiling with a new legal team. Angela and her daughter Gracie are striving for justice for Grant. Gracie prefers to live with her mother and not see her father. They launched a website and gathered support from many people after Grant's death. However, the pastor, the school principal, and other individuals denied any involvement. One of Grant's classmates mentioned that she, along with Gracie, asked the school administration to intervene and protect them from Aaron, but the school dismissed their request, saying it was beyond their responsibility. In Tennessee, there is a law requiring anyone who suspects child abuse to report it to the Department of Children. However, no one reported anything in this case. After Grant's death, students were not allowed to discuss the tragedy at school. Later, the pastor left the church, causing a significant split within the congregation. Currently, Aaron has not been charged with any crimes related to Grant, and he denies all accusations against him. Aaron's supporters occasionally post on social media, accusing Gracie and Angela of lying and behaving unchristianly. Angela and Gracie live together but are afraid of Aaron. Gracie aspires to become an FBI agent to help people through investigations. The tragic story of the Solomon family leaves behind many painful and unforgettable lessons about domestic abuse and violence, as well as society's indifference to victims. Through this story, we clearly see the need to protect children and vulnerable family members from abusive acts. At the same time, the importance of support from the community and authorities is also emphasized. Let's speak up together and protect the vulnerable so that no family has to endure such pain again. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Christy Giles. Christy and her friends attended a Halloween party at Soho House, West Hollywood, and had a fantastic time. After the party, however, Christy and her friend Hilda didn't go home. Christy Giles, born November 5, 1997, grew up in Mount Olive, Alabama. She is extremely beautiful and intelligent, attracting attention wherever she goes. Christy was the runner-up in the Miss Alabama beauty pageant. At the age of 14, she signed her first modeling contract, gaining financial independence from her parents. At the age of 18, she moved to Los Angeles, California after being recruited by a famous modeling agency. By the age of 24, she had become a successful model, appearing in fashion magazines and advertising for major brands, while also exploring acting. Christy is very close to her parents and sisters. In 2019, Christy met Jan and married him on August 31, 2020. They are a loving couple and her husband owns a candy store. On Friday, November 12, Christy, along with Christine Giles, Hilda Marcelo Sobrales Arzola, and another friend whose name is unknown, attended a Halloween party. Jan was away in San Francisco for the weekend and couldn't join them. After the party, Christy and Hilda did not return home. At around 5 p.m. on Saturday, Christy's body was found dead on the sidewalk outside a Culver City hospital where she had been left. 2 hours later, Hilda, 26, was found outside another hospital, still alive and in critical condition. Her family traveled from Mexico to be by her side, hoping she would recover. Sadly, there was no miracle. Hilda was declared brain dead 2 weeks later and taken off life support. Her organs were donated, allowing part of her to continue living. Hilda, who is from Mexico, graduated with honors and landed her dream job as an interior designer in Los Angeles. A third friend who attended the party with Christy left early and was not injured. Preliminary autopsy results indicate the girls died of an overdose of illegal substances. Toxicology reports found a mixture of drugs in their systems, but no signs of a physical struggle. It is unclear how the drugs entered their systems, as both girls said they lived healthy lifestyles. Initially, Los Angeles police believed the girls had voluntarily taken the drugs, leading to their overdoses. However, after interviewing a friend of Christy and Hilda, their views changed. The friend mentioned that the girls had met several men at the party, and that the men had invited them elsewhere. She described the group as 4 men in their 40s and 1 woman. 2 men act indecently, running around shirtless as if they are on drugs, while a third man, who appears sober, focuses on Hilda. A 4th man and a woman appear to be a couple. This group stands out at the party because of their age. Initially, the woman compliments Christy's friend, leading to an introduction to the men. Feeling uncomfortable, Christy's friend left the party with her brother an hour after the group arrived. Surveillance footage revealed 3 masked men dropping the women's bodies at separate hospitals before fleeing. Christy's husband, Jan, was deeply saddened by her death, as she had never used drugs, especially since her cousin had struggled with addiction and a close friend had died of an overdose. Jan suspected her drink had been spiked. At 12 o'clock, Jan tracked her phone to an apartment building at 8641 West Olympic Boulevard in Los Angeles, where the girls reportedly attended a party. Her phone was still there at 1:30 a.m. The police discovered that the building had only 7 apartments and identified which one hosted the party and who invited the girls. It was David Pierce's apartment. He claimed the girls took drugs voluntarily, but he has no information about what happened to them. Recently, it was reported that the police interviewed David's neighbors. They mentioned hearing strange sounds, like cries of pain, coming from his apartment on Saturday throughout the day. They also noticed that many people frequently visited his place, often making noise. Other bones from the first party also saw David with friends at the party, and they behaved strangely. After Jan shared Christy's story on social media, he received numerous messages from other girls who had similar experiences involving these men. They reported being taken from parties, drugged, and raped, though all the girls survived. Out of fear, they did not report it to the police. Christy's father was a military officer who served in Iraq and trained his daughters in self-defense. Christy's sisters were well prepared and could defend themselves even with a ballpoint pen. This makes it all the more puzzling for Christy's parents to understand what happened to her, as there were no signs of a struggle on her body. Hilda's family is also seeking justice for both Hilda and Christy. Hilda's parents are confident that their daughter did not willingly consume any illegal substances. They had taught her about the dangers of drugs. Hilda was an active person who loved sports and hiking. Her family believes that the girls were forcefully given drugs with the intent of assaulting them, but the perpetrators overdosed them by mistake. What angered the parents was that instead of taking Hilda and Christy to the hospital to save them, the men chose to abandon them. On December 16, 2021, the Los Angeles Police Department announced the arrest of 3 men connected to the deaths of Christy Giles and her friend Hilda. David Pierce, 37, was arrested for manslaughter and is being held on $1 million bail. Michael Ansbach, 47, and Brant Osborne, 42, were arrested for being accessories after the fact to manslaughter, with both held on $100,000 bail. These men were the last to see the women alive. A photo has surfaced showing Hilda with David and Michael at the party. Location data from Christy's phone showed that she and Hilda had gone to David's apartment in East Los Angeles after attending a party. They were reportedly out with 3 men in the early morning hours of November 13, according to David's neighbors. A Toyota Prius seen in surveillance footage matched the vehicle used when three masked men dropped Christy and Hilda off near the hospital. The men were known to frequent clubs and bars in Los Angeles, meeting women at parties, inviting them to their homes, allegedly using illegal drugs, raping them, and then releasing them. But for Christy and Hilda, it appears they miscalculated, leading to their overdoses. The police are currently gathering information from all the affected girls. Several girls have already come forward, claiming they ended up in David's apartment under similar circumstances. They believe that the men spiked their drinks without their consent, causing them to black out and lose memory of the events. Some girls also reported that the men harassed them, pretending to be film producers, and invited them to a casting. It has been revealed that Michael is a videographer, Brandt is an actor with minor TV roles, and David is an actor and producer known. According to several co-stars on set, Brandt bragged about driving Christy's Hyundai the night they died. Actor Stephen Bauer, known for his role in the cult classic Scarface, has come forward to say he witnessed David assaulting a girl at a house party in Beverly Hills. The men were questioned by the police and admitted to taking the girls home from the party. However, they claimed the girls took drugs voluntarily and overdosed. Unsure of what to do, they decided not to call 911 to avoid trouble. Instead, they left Christy's body near a hospital after removing the car's license plate to avoid detection. They later left Hilda's body at the hospital, hoping she would regain consciousness. To date, the police have not received the CCTV footage as the investigation is still ongoing. A GoFundMe has raised more than $130,000 for the girls' funerals or investigation, and the amount continues to grow every day. On November 20, 2021, a memorial service was held for Christy in California. Friends laid flowers on the beach, carved hearts in the sand, and erected bushes and arches in her memory. Brandt, 42, and Michael, 47, were both arrested on suspicion of being accessory to manslaughter in connection with the deaths of Christy and Hilda, but have since been released from custody while the investigation continues.